for us? There you go.
All right, good evening and welcome to the Ward 1 Neighborhood Advisory Board meeting for Monday, January 31st. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes. Mike Ginsburg.
Here.
Valerie Lovett. Absent at this time. Margot Presovich. Oh, can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry, unmuted. I'm here.
Wonderful. Bridget Spear. Absent at this time. Oh, wait, sorry. Absent at this time. Rhonda Thiessen. Tyson.
Here.
Wonderful. Jerry Wagner. Sorry, Jerry Wagner. Great. Present. Carla Waringhouse.
Looks like she's connecting now.
Yes. Carla, can you hear us? Unmute yourself to tell us you're here.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Wonderful. Carla is present at this time. All right, we have a quorum and this meeting can be called to order.
Thank you. We'll move on to item A2, public comment. This item is for either public comment or any action item or for any general public comment that is limited to no more than 3 minutes for each commentator. So any...
Great. And this is Amy Pennington for the record. I'm just going to give a little bit of direction as this may be new for people to be doing this virtually. There is a hand raising function that you should be able to see on your screen, or there'll be 3 dots where you can press that and it'll say raise hand. And if you raise your hand now for public comment, we can give you permission to speak. Right. I see that we have a public comment from Eileen Bidwell.
Hi.
Eileen, your time is starting.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, my name is Eileen Bidwell for the record. And one of the main reasons my husband and I moved to Reno when we retired was our discovery of the stunningly beautiful Truckee River. We live near the river and nothing makes us happier than walking along the Crooked Mile Trail to Idlewild Park and beyond and experiencing the river and its various moods and the exquisite mountain views. We participate in the community cleanups and invasive weed removal. Well, my husband does that because I no longer can. I help plant summer flowers and spring bulbs every year at Bicentennial Park with Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful and the Rotary Club. We volunteer with Truckee Meadows Parks Foundation to fill 3 dog waste bag stations along the river. And we even sponsor a station. Well, actually, our dog is the official sponsor. Best of all, my husband helps care for and maintain the lovely sensory garden in Idlewild Park. And I also help with garden chores. We also work with a UNR program as citizen scientists to track butterflies along the path every summer for tracking butterfly species along the river. As our community continues to grow at this astounding pace, we need more recreational and cultural opportunities around this natural wonder that flows through our city. As plans are developed for improvements to the public spaces, public bathrooms must be considered an essential part of any plans to serve the public. They are part of the foundation of a welcoming and inclusive public space and must be invested in for public health and for the goal of our community. Thank you so much for listening.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other public comment? I don't see any other hands raised. There's Art, so we'll go on to Art Rangel. You're next.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a question. Is the Glow Plaza on the agenda? I didn't see a staff report. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Let's see. I don't know if I can answer that. Yes, the Glow Plaza is on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment? Give a second to see if anybody else raises their hand. All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to item A3, approval of tonight's agenda.
I do have one note on that. Staff recommends pulling item B43, Booth Street rezoning, as the applicant is not here to present, as they've requested more time for their application.
All right, thank you. Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda? Does anybody have any changes towards the agenda? If not, I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I think Jerry moved and all second.
Motion.
Okay, so that was Jerry first, Rhonda second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes. We're going to move on to item A4, approval of the minutes from October 11th, 2021 and November 8th, 2021. Has everybody had a chance to review?
Yes.
We're going to need it. We'll do it by October 11th. We'll approve that one first. So do we have a motion to approve October 11th, 2021 minutes?
So moved.
Okay, Rhonda, thank you. Second. I'll second it. How's that?
Well, Jerry raised his hand.
I don't see it. I can't see his hand. So. Jerry, so when you second or make a motion, maybe take yourself off mute so I can at least hear you.
Okay.
All right, so all those in favor of approving the minutes from October 11th, 2021, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes. We'll move on to the minutes from November 8th, 2021. Do we have a motion to approve those?
So
Motion,
moved.
whatever. Second.
Jerry first. Rhonda second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, that passes. We'll move on to item A5, Council Liaison Report.
All righty. Better late than never, but Happy New Year to everyone. You can still say that because it's January 31. I have a little bit of an update since we last met. I'm getting a little feedback maybe. Is it just me? Are you guys getting feedback? Okay, maybe I'm good now. So I can't recall if when we last met, redistricting had completed. I think, I can't remember if it had, okay. Well, after that, and Nick and I, as we usually do, did our tour. And so I am still acquainting myself with some of the new areas that have come into Ward 1, primarily those around more or less the Costco shopping center, the Kidski area, and then there's the golf course neighborhood, and then portions of Virginia Lake. I'm pretty familiar with Virginia Lake because I lived over on Watt Street for 7 years before I moved to where I live now. But still, it's, things change, and it's been good to get to acquaint myself with the new areas. I want to also say that the big news at the end of the year was the storm. The big massive storm. It got me stuck over visiting my folks in the Bay Area for about 11 days. So I wasn't here right when it hit to see how it went. But my impression is that it was managed pretty well in terms of road plowing. And it is a reminder, I think, that there was still a lot of snow around when I came back, but the one the year before that hit, it hammered the North Valleys and I think parts of Call and Cache Hill. Whereas this one, was big and massive, but it seemed to have not caused as many issues in Ward 1. So, or maybe it was because it was the holidays, people's rhythm was different. I don't know, but I didn't get a lot of feedback about that storm impact to the neighborhoods as I did the year before. So just wanted to share that with y'all. We only have a few people here today because I did appoint some new members and they'll be joining us at our February meeting. And we need to discuss that at the end of the agenda. And figure out when we're going to meet, because we obviously moved off of this. This isn't our regular date, and we have a discussion to have about when our next date would want to be. I really thank Amy for being a liaison to pinch hit. Nick, yeah, it's nice to see you, Amy, and it's good for the liaisons to kind of get an eyeball how the other wards work. So that's great. Nick went home sick, which is understandable. The councils had our two meetings this month. And the ones that the items I want to highlight are a big one, more or less, was the first allocation of the big federal investment that's coming down our way. That was the first tranche of $24 million on our last agenda. And we earmarked about $13 million for affordable housing programs and projects. And we're going to have a workshop in February to outline that. I'm excited about it. A lot of ground to cover, both in increasing our subsidized housing stock and creating policy for the market to produce the housing that our people need. So long overdue and opportunities. There's been a lot of news about the Bonanza Hotel, which is in Ward 1. I think the RGJ mentioned that today. I just want to say that the city has not had any discussion, the city council, about that property. The Reno Housing Authority, I understand, has. The mayor sits on that. So does Councilmember Delgado. And it's one of those odd boards that the mayor has more appointing authority. And so, I think the council appoints, but it's a 5-member board. 1 member has to be a member of the housing authority's housing stock. And so pretty autonomous, but there's always room for partnership. And there has been partnership with the federal money that's come down so far. And there's a lot of involvement with the housing authority under the last time the feds came in and rescued the economy with the housing mortgage foreclosure crises. So they're key partners, but this concept of the buying the Bonanza, nothing has come forward to the council table, although I do understand the housing authority is perhaps making a bid for that property that's available. The council also, and I know it's of interest to this board, did enter into the first step in the construction for the Moana pool replacement. So really excited about that. That project is moving forward. Tax revenues are coming in pretty well on the sales tax. I think room tax is just at where it needs to be, but the council's added a lot of positions, including some firefighters we had through grant funding, which we hope to keep on once that grant funding lapses, and also some public safety officers and some bits and pieces around the organization. Also, the River Rangers, I think, are now in service. So, and we're about to go into bargaining with all of our bargaining agreement groups too. So raising salary costs is there to pay people what they're worth. So keeping a real close eye, I am, on the fiscal, because the federal money seems to have a way to disguise weaknesses you might have in your local economy to support the local government that you're building in these times. And it's going to be really important to have good fiscal management in this uncertain, volatile times we're coming out of. Let's see. Oh, the council had 2 development requests outside of Ward 1 that I want to talk about. One was the judge's decision ordering the council to approve a tentative map. I've never seen anything like that before. Usually a judge will remand, which means go think about it again, council. And on a 4-3 split, the council decided not to appeal the judge's ruling, even though I think there were jurisdictional questions of legal procedure that I don't get into. I understand more the record that's been produced by the governing body, but the council is never wrong. And the council did decide on a 4-3 majority to issue that tentative map, which brings you up near Somerset to a higher elevation on the Peavine flank than we've ever been before. So that's where we're at. And likewise, over off the North Virginia corridor, the council on an appeal overturned the planning commission that had denied a subdivision going a little bit higher than we have over in the Hogue Road area, Rancho Vista Parkway. I wanted to support that and have it sent back down to the Planning Commission to look at a few matters related to the design and the treatment of a drainage that is going to get filled in, a massive drainage that's going to get filled in with a culvert to provide a secondary access. I thought there could have been a better option there, but wasn't willing to support it without some sort of redesign consideration going down to the Planning Commission. And I guess I just bring this up because Ward 1, with the exception of the Pines, which are the private land above Collin Ranch and the mini storage area there, we've run out of private land. We've run out of hillside land that's going to get developed, maybe some odds and ends here. These elevation, the issues of rockery walls, who maintains those long-term, they're really not an issue at hand in Ward 1. We've got other issues, but I like to call that out and take that opportunity to discuss that. The council also adopted RTC's impact fees. These are fees that are paid at every building permit to increase capacity on your roadway, to move more cars through your roads. I felt that's been the missing link to advantage, an incentive to build more in your urban core, where you don't want to be building Plumas Lane to 4 lanes. In a matter of fact, many years ago, a bunch of people stopped Plumas Street, for example, to being 4 lanes. So there's no reason to be charging these fees in your urban area, and give urban developers an opportunity to get relief on that and then pass that on to home prices. And I'm going to be bringing that up at our affordable housing workshop in February as an example of an across the board fee that probably is not applicable and can advance some of our housing opportunities. The council did approve those 2 abandonments that Jacobs Entertainment had asked for and came to you, I think, in October. The Ralston one, Ralston 5th and Church and 2nd. I'm at the point with these where the finding to the council has to be that the public won't be harmed. And I am at a point of a perspective of seeing that Jacobs has caused harm, about 600 residential units displaced. And so to the degree that I saw those 2 facilitating more tear down of more units, even if they were Victorian, boarding houses, that's a problem, and that's one of harm there. And also felt that there should be clawbacks for Jacobs if their programs don't materialize, because many have not materialized. A lot hasn't materialized in terms of them building up, for clawbacks. And the place for that was in the development agreement that the council adopted without any sort of, clawbacks or consideration for these abandonments. Legitimate stuff to have in there, and it wasn't. And so couldn't support those. They moved forward. The development agreement is still not fully executed, I understand, because there was some allowances for the manager to work out some details. The Neon Line meeting did happen on our on our regular scheduled agenda. I listened in. I know a lot of you did. And I think the result of that is a chronicle of the input, and I don't know what other role that meeting and that input will provide as that project moves forward. The Neon Line is on our litigation docket right now. I meet quarterly with our city attorney. He's an independently elected person, manages our legal affairs, and he's got some respondent briefs to answer. I think the litigation is very narrow, brought by Scenic Nevada, and has to do with right-of-ways and signs. And let me look over. That's about it. With Nick and I have been trying to go out on our monthly field trip. I don't know if he's going to make it with me. I think I'm going to go out Friday. So if there's anyone who has anything in the neighborhood that they think I should look at, let me know and I'll go check it out. I've got a few things on that list. And if there's any questions for me, I'll answer those. I think Carla maybe has her hand up.
Yeah, I had one sort of point that to bring up about the storm issue, and then another about about housing. So the storm, yeah, I think it wasn't bad, the storm. My only issue, and I think this is really more of a private property issue, is that the sidewalks were deadly for about a week after that storm. It was pretty terrible trying to walk around town because it was just ice everywhere. So they got the streets cleared, but you know, there were issues for pedestrians everywhere. For housing, I'm just trying to understand this better myself as a new person in Reno, relatively new in Reno and new to the NAB, and having listened to that Neon Line meeting, I'm trying to understand more of the sort of development planning issues in other areas. Like when I came from California, when a development is permitted, the government, essentially the planning, you know, whoever grants the permit can stipulate about things like affordable housing, how many units and so forth. It sounded to me like, as I was listening to that Neon Line development, that it was all voluntary, that it was basically like the developer just kind of saying, like, out of the goodness of his heart, like, okay, maybe I'll, you know, put in some work housing or affordable, you know, or whatever, affordable housing. Is that the case? Is there nothing that the city does when they're approving a project to stipulate things like affordable housing? Is that correct?
Well, 2 points, Carlin. Thanks for bringing those up. Number one, the icy sidewalks. I did have a fair amount of dialogue with folks who brought that up and said, what is the property owner's obligation to the sidewalks? And it is to maintain, it is to shovel and get out there and take care of it. It's not written in, you know, particularly strong. I've called in on icy sidewalks years ago. Lowe's on Kitski had, you know, didn't shovel for 2 weeks, and they've got probably $100,000 worth of shoveling and snow blowing equipment in there. It drove me crazy. It was on the route to a bus stop. But, you know, in the neighborhood setting, yeah, people do need to get out there. Business owners have an interest because they want people usually visiting their businesses, but it probably is more of a public education that the city could do. And, you know, when it falls in the holidays, you got people gone, you got a problem. Oh, I also want to add, Carly, on December 3rd, the manager put everything remote, and that's why we're remote. The council is still an opportunity to appear in person, and I've been doing that. And then the other one, you know, the development agreement is a very loose statute in terms of being broad. That's a good, that's a bad thing. It's basically a contract between two parties that's adopted by ordinance, and anything goes, anything can be in there. And the council decided not to hold them to any, you know, obligations that you might see in jurisdictions that have adopted what's known as inclusionary zoning. Whereas if you're going to come in for 80 units, you need to make 20 or of those, or, you know, 5 of those deed restricted, subsidized. So the agreement is what the agreement is, and that's it. I have no doubt that it will come back at Jacob's request for amendments. And I sat through an entire issue proceeding out of Utah on development agreements. And the word was, and this was like, you know, all the legal minds in Salt Lake City, very common state, is don't do development agreements in urban settings. They don't work. They're really meant for greenfield and timing development and infrastructure. So we'll see how this goes.
Thanks. So Jerry, you're next.
Yeah, just briefly to go back to sidewalks. I know some cities have ordinances that after a storm, you have 6 hours or so to clear a sidewalk. So I got from what you were saying that Reno has nothing of that ilk.
You know, I'll look it up. The RMC, it's in 12, which is the public works section. And when we get into resiliency, that section, I'll look it up. And it would be great. I've looked at this for years. It would be interesting to see if someone wanted to do a comparative analysis to see different ones. You know, it probably could be written on a more timely basis, but it's a tough one. You know, you get a single family hilly neighborhood with an elderly person in there and putting a 6-hour burden on them. That's pretty hard. to be able to get out there. And our snows are so infrequent that a lot of people don't contract with the snow providers, removal providers like you might see in Tahoe. And a lot of times it's gone, so quickly anyway. It is a tough one. My focus has really been getting the city to get the bike paths, the walk down California Avenue, those public routes done too.
Yeah, in our area, for example, we've got a lot of squirrely streets. Some people have sidewalks, some people don't. It's very hit or miss. And it's, so putting a really hard line restriction on people, it seems to me is rather impractical in some of these neighborhoods.
Yeah, I mean, my theory is in every grouping of 3 or 4 blocks, there's someone who is waiting for the snow to fall and has in their garage a snow blower ready to go. And that person, invariably will be out there looking to help other people out. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But anyway, thanks. Margot.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I'm just inquiring on these development agreements like the Jacobs thing, because I listened to that entire thing and actually tried to make some comments about it. But and we're going to see that today in this particular meeting. When a proposal is made, and I know we have no control over it. For example, in Lake Ridge, they said they were going to do 150 units and everybody said fine, and they did 314. Is there a way once a developer says, hey, this is my concept, this is what we're doing, that they have to be held to that? Because this is getting out of control in Reno.
You really need to understand at every juncture, and maybe I'll highlight it when we get to the development item agreements, is what's the nature of the request? And like I said, the development agreement is very rare. I actually, as a city staff member, wrote the development agreement ordinance, which has since been amended. It was amended really as a lead up to Jacobs, and I think at Jacobs' request. But we've only done 2 in the city in 30 years. And one was for Meadowood Mall and one was for Jacobs. So it's a real one-off, but it's also very open. So you really need to go through a plan unit development, like how Lake Ridge built out, or Collin or Somerset. Now that's another massive scale. And then other things are just very small or site specific, like a tentative map to subdivide land or a special use permit. And on a tentative map to subdivide land, you have to build in accordance, very tight accordance with that approval. So the more specific the development request is, the more that is provided in detail, the more you're held to something. On other things, which are bigger planning approvals, there's more leeway and fluidity in there. And then you always have, and our code's really liberalized in the last couple of years, good, bad, to allow a lot of things, a lot of options that people can do, very big range. So it's always at their discretion.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Isn't there a way to say, if this is your proposal, that's your proposal, without saying, okay, we're going to change the zoning and now the planning commission can do whatever it wants as long as it complies with that zoning, or we're going to do X? Because I think the density, I think that the height of buildings and other things are getting way out of control to keep the city, because according to the regional plan, it's supposed to be compatible with the neighborhood and not, destroy or injure the neighborhood.
The one thing that I am really advocating for to implement the master plan is to have a good handle on what's getting approved and not built, because we don't need a whole lot of drama, every 5 years for the same piece of ground that doesn't get built. That's not good. It's not good to plan your services and your capital improvements on. And I really do hope that as we start to think about implementing the master plan, we can really track what's going on in real time. That's how you know if you're going to be building projects that meet your needs. So there's a lot to be done on that. But anyway, maybe your questions, Margot, are best on a very specific, when you have the projects, ask those questions. What can change? What, if you get this approval, what's to make it not look like, how much do you have to build to what I'm seeing today on these drawings? Those are, I think, more illustrative questions to ask. So thank you.
I see one audience member pop up, then disappear. So Patty Carr. You had a question, but don't see it anymore. So we're going to move on to anything else, Jenny?
No, nope.
All right, we'll move on to item A6, staff liaison report.
I do not have a report today, but if anyone has any additional questions for me, feel free to ask them. But yeah, I don't have anything else to add.
You might not have the answers, right? All right, we're going to move on to business items. We're going to move on to item B1. That's TXT 21-0004 tree protection ordinance. This is for information only.
Mr. Chair, hello. I'm Kelly Mullen, Principal Planner with the City of Reno, here to present the city's tree protection ordinance that is in draft form right now. And I just want to double check and make sure that you're able to see the PowerPoint screen that I've got up.
We can see it and we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So this evening, we're just going to talk a little bit about what is currently proposed for the project. And again, we're addressing tree protection standards within the City of Reno. We'll talk about some of the key changes from the draft, go through the timeline for the overall process, and talk a little bit about opportunities for involvement as well. And then following that, we'd like to get any questions or comments that you members of the board or members of the folks who are in attendance have for us. And I would like to also point out reno.gov/trees has more information about the project. You can read the draft language, submit comments, and also subscribe to updates. So there's a lot of information on the screen. I'm not going to go through it all, but the intent here is just to drive home the point that the City of Reno and City Council has adopted a number of policies that focus on the importance of the city's tree canopy, the importance of protecting it and expanding it, not just the overall tree canopy in terms of its environmental benefits, but also social benefits, economic benefits. We have policies that are adopted in the master plan, in the sustainability plan, and in our urban forestry management plan. So I think most folks are probably aware that when it comes to requirements for landscaping and for trees, when new development goes in, there's generally some sort of landscaping that is required to be installed. But what that looks like, of course, is going to be based on the use that is proposed. Generally speaking, you will see standards for things like the number of trees that need to be planted, what the soil requirements are, requirements for irrigation, size of vegetation, shrubs, that sort of thing that go in. There are, for certain types of permits, also requirements to provide an inventory of existing trees on site. And then in our current code as well, you will find requirements for when there are trees that are in the front yard or in the right of way, if they're proposed to be removed, that those losses need to be mitigated. But again, right now, that is just for the front yard and right of way. And of course, landscaping that is required to be installed needs to be maintained. There are penalties if it is not. And then public trees, generally speaking, are going to be more heavily protected. It's something that right now, if you would like to impact a public tree in any way, remove it, permits are generally required for that work. So what are some of the issues that we're trying to get at with this ordinance? In addition to implementing some of the policies that I had up on the previous screen, there's also some items that just going through the process of implementation for folks going through the permitting process, administering the code standards, there are items that have come up that we're seeking to address as part of this process. One of those is a concern about landscaping that's required to be installed as part of a development actually being removed or being damaged outside of that permitting process. So once construction is complete, sometimes you'll see, I think, some of the more visible issues in town. In a couple of commercial centers, you may have seen where the trees have been topped. That is an example of one of the types of issues we'd like to address with this. Another that's been noticed on the back end that we really want to take care of as part of this process is when landscaping that is required to be installed and there are plans that are submitted and approved for its installation, when that landscaping is not actually installed according to the plans or according to generally accepted standards. Of course, that's something that could lead to reduced chances for those trees being able to survive and thrive in the long term. And again, right now, our tree protection standards are only applicable in the front yard, only applicable to street trees, and only during construction activities. So that's another item that you'll see some changes to as part of this process. And then something that we've heard from the folks who are actually going through the permitting process is when there's gray area, when there's uncertainty around when tree protection standards actually apply, how public trees are appraised, who has responsibility for maintaining them, and then what the penalties are when the standards are not followed. So those are all things that we're looking to add clarity for. And then, of course, just like many other jurisdictions across the United States, there's always limited resources for implementation and enforcement. So that's something that we would like to get at as well. So with that in mind, back in July, the City Council initiated this code amendment. A draft was prepared, and then it went to the Reno Urban Forestry Commission for a series of about 6 workshops in the fall, where they provided some direction and made a number of changes to that draft. What is available on the website right now on reno.gov/trees is that draft language from the Urban Forestry Commission, and essentially it covers changes to 2 major sections of the Reno Municipal Code. The first is Chapter 8.32. That is the chapter that governs our public trees and also private trees that have been deemed to be a nuisance. And then also Title 18. Title 18 is also known as the zoning code or annexation and land development code. That's where you find most of the standards when a new property or when a property is looking to develop or make improvements on it. You'll see all sorts of standards related to development of it, including tree protection and landscaping. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the changes in each of those major sections. Right now, we'll cover 8.32, and again, that's the chapter on public trees. You'll find an enhanced purpose statement, some additional definitions that are intended to add clarity to the language that is in that chapter, and then also a new option where potential trees that are significant in some way, they may be awesome specimens of some sort, where they could potentially be designated as what's called a landmark tree. Right now, we have provisions in code that would allow for a public tree to be designated as a landmark tree. And so this is something new where we're looking to allow for that ability for private trees to receive that same designation. And then you'll also see a number of changes that are aimed at clarifying those maintenance responsibilities for property owners who abut a tree that is in a parkway, a tree that's in the right of way, also known as a street tree, and just clarify what their responsibilities are versus, say, an HOA or the urban forester. And also looking to put in a new process for when you do have a property owner adjacent to a public tree and they wish to have that tree removed, identifying what the process that they would need to go through for doing something like that. And then we also have some new language related to how public trees are appraised, and that includes a brand new option that we're calling a simplified appraisal method. Also, you'll see in that chapter a number of clarifications related to permitting and appeals, as well as cleanups of some of the existing language to kind of consolidate information in various sections and remove language that is available in other portions of our code. So now we'll talk about Title 18. Again, that's the zoning code. When you're developing private property, you'll go here to get a better sense of what is required for developing that property and the standards. The biggest change in Title 18 is what I would classify as an overhaul of the tree protection standards. And it's, one of the key pieces of that is expanding the applicability of those standards so that they would now kick in across private property. If you remember, I said earlier that the tree protection standards right now are only applicable to trees that are in the front yard or in the right of way. And when I say front yard, I mean in the front setback area. And right now, those standards are only applicable during construction activities. So this expansion would again go across the entire private property and for any and all activities that may impact those trees. In terms of uses, those standards would apply to non-residential uses, mixed uses, multifamily, and common open space areas of single family subdivisions. In terms of the sizing of trees where it would kick in, if that tree is 2 inches in diameter or larger, the tree protection standards would apply. That threshold gets kicked up a little bit if it happens to be a tree that is one of our prohibited species list. There are some exemptions that are proposed that you will see in the draft. Those exemptions include single family homes and duplex homes, vegetation thinning that needs to occur as part of an approved defensible space plan, and then of course if there's an imminent safety issue. So again, we talked about that one of the biggest changes relates to those tree protection standards, and the focus there is really expanding the incentives to preserve existing trees on site. And that right now, in our current code, we allow for a credit of up to 30% of preserved trees to apply to requirements for new landscaping. That would be bumped up to 50%. The credit there would be based on the size of the tree. But then also the flip side of that is expanding the mitigation that's required when a tree is proposed to be removed. So right now, 30% replacement is required. With the current draft that came out from the Reno Urban Forestry Commission, that would get bumped up to 100% replacement of diameter inches of trees lost. That would go down to about 50%, again, for those prohibited species, but generally speaking, you'd see a 100% replacement requirement. Recognizing that there may be some constraints to be able to replant all of the replacement trees on site, there's also some new options, alternatives that are being proposed. One of those is an option for planting those replacement trees on public property according to the requirements of the urban forester, or potentially paying an in lieu fee to the Relief Reno Fund, and that would be based on the tree's value. You also see some new procedures being proposed. One of those is a new landscape permit. So if trees are proposed to be impacted outside of that construction permitting process, that this is a new permit type that could be used to just verify that the standards are being met, that the protection standards are being met as well. And then also potential flexibility for when there are specific extraordinary circumstances that may be in place on a property, providing a little bit of flexibility through a process called modification of standards. Some of the other changes that you'll see: updated requirements for trees located within parking lots and the soil that they are planted in. Also updated requirements for the sizing associated with new street trees, and then ensuring that newly planted trees meet the city's soil quality and volume standards. Apart from the code changes, there's a lot of work that's being done by staff to actually improve processes and procedures, behind the scenes, looking to identify ways to streamline the permitting process, streamline tracking, move some items out of code and into what are called standard details to allow for an easier permitting process. And then one of the key pieces that's part of this proposal as well is to start doing inspections on site to ensure that that landscaping that is approved as part of a plan is actually installed in that way. That is something that would require additional staffing. So as part of that request to council, there will be a resource request to have that allocated as well. And then just in terms of timeline, the city has been making strides in terms of improving its tree canopy and adopting policies related to that since at least 2015. But for this particular portion of those efforts, like I mentioned earlier, back in July, City Council initiated the amendment. We've gone through those workshops with the Urban Forestry Commission in the fall. We have that draft that is going out to the community right now. Throughout this entire month of January, we've had a series of workshops, neighborhood advisory board meetings, open houses. We're looking to get significant input from the community, from stakeholders, and take that to help craft that next iteration of the next draft. Then that next draft will go to the Urban Forestry Commission and Planning Commission for a recommendation before going to council, hopefully in late spring for adoption. We've got a list of various stakeholders on the screen. The purpose behind having this here is just to drive home the fact that we have a very diverse group of stakeholders, folks who have an interest in this ordinance. We recognize that with all of those different stakeholders, there are a lot of different perspectives on the issue, There are a lot of different priorities, and that's why we've been trying to go through a pretty extensive public outreach process so that we can speak with, the folks who are part of the local landscaping community, or developers, owners of businesses and private properties, government agencies, other interested groups like environmental protection groups, that sort of thing. So we are actually concluding our formal outreach with this evening's Neighborhood Advisory Board meeting that wraps up the formal workshops and meetings that we've had in this month. However, I do want to remind anybody who has an interest that reno.gov/trees has more information there. You can read those drafts. You can submit comments. We had asked for comments to be submitted by today, January 31st, but certainly if this topic is new to you, if you have an interest in it and would like to review those drafts and submit comments, if you're able to do that and send them over to us this week, that would be great. And then we can take that into consideration as we start crafting that next draft. So with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you so much for having us here this evening. And in case you do have any questions, also with me here is the urban forester, Matt Basil, and also Jamie Schroeder, the director of our Parks and Recreation Department.
Thank you. We'll open it up to questions. I see Jerry has a question.
Okay,
There you go.
just a couple of initial points. In the West, only about 1 to 2% of our total land area can be classified as riparian land. And it's the most critical land in terms of wildlife habitat. 90% of all the surface waters in this state, like other Western states, are ephemeral. That means that basically we have very little riparian area and very little riparian area with flowing water during warm weather. One of the problems I have with what you proposed is that it tends to lack any kind of priority. I saw you had tree appraisal in there. Not all trees are created equal. If you look at, for example, the summertime riparian areas that we have in the city, that would be along the Truckee River and along our urban ditches, all right? Some of those are extremely large and mature trees. I don't see where your ordinance gives them any priority whatsoever for removal. That's one problem. And I would say that if you can't make some specific accommodation in that regard, you could at least maybe alter your overall purpose and objective statements to identify or at least recognize that some trees in some areas of the urban environment, riparian areas in particular, have greater importance than others. That might give a basis for legal action if your ordinance doesn't have specific protections, which I don't see. The other part of this is what happens when city agencies go in. We're talking about a major increase in funding for stormwater program. That stormwater hardening and those improvements are going to be targeted to a lot of ditches and riparian areas. That's where we have a lot of old, mature forest and trees. Are they given a free rein here? Is this only impacting private landowners? How do you prevent wholesale tree removal by public improvement projects? Yeah, and that's basically my comment.
Those are great questions. Thank you. And Chair, would you like me to respond to those now or wait until the end of the
If you'd
call?
like to respond, I'd say respond to each one if you're going to respond.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Jerry. So just to point out, I guess, a couple of things related to your questions. One of them is that we do have a separate section in our Reno Municipal Code related to wetland and stream environments. So that actually, we have a whole separate administrative manual that deals with potential impacts and mitigation to resources like that. The proposed ordinance does make some minor changes to, I think, better address specifically vegetation and trees in those areas. You know, and certainly that is an important resource for us as well. It's something that we wanted to make sure that the vegetation portion of those resources are recognized and protected. So that's on just the, you know, the riparian piece. And then in terms of the city agencies, you know, the city aims to hold itself to the same standards that private property is held to in terms of development. So that's something that, you know, we've been talking about internally too, and, you know, what those processes are. And then in terms of targeting to ditches and some of that other work that would be in some of those riparian areas, again, you know, depending on if it, let's say, is a significant hydrologic resource that's identified as such within our code and within that administrative manual, then they would be subject to that wetland and stream environment
The
protection
problem I
standards.
have with what you're saying is that when you're talking about specific resources or strategic areas, those are things you recognize as being natural. Most of our riparian area and through the neighborhoods are a result of artificial ditches, which have become naturalized over time. But do you give that? You don't give them the same legal standing as you would a natural channel.
That is a great question. I don't know off the top of my head if we have specifically any of the ditches that are on that hydrologic resource map. That's something that I can check, but I appreciate that comment, and it's a great thing for us to consider as part of this, so thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to Carla next.
Yeah, I think we all love trees and see their importance, and you know, I understand what was just said too about, you know, where they are and where they're most important. I happened to see a lot of comments on this recently, and I forget what site it was on, but there were a lot of comments that I think were valuable. Like there are a lot of private property owner concerns about, you know, maybe government overreach is the way to say it, into the control of their trees, you know, being able to handle problem trees, being able to cut down limbs that are threatening their roof or blocking their solar panels or whatever. People are very concerned about, you know, basically the government telling them what they can do with trees that are on their property that they feel are, you know, maybe not optimal. So while we all love trees, I think you have to be very sensitive to that. Also, you know, obviously you may stipulate the trees have to go in, but what are we stipulating? What kind of irrigation? You know, if they're not watered, they're going to die. You know, are we controlling that as well when new developments are put in? People were commenting about, well, we should focus on them being in parking lots. You know, that's an obvious place where we should have more of them. And, you know, maybe that should be the emphasis in a new development. You know, that their emphasis should be on them on public property. You know, there's a whole lot of work done on Virginia Street recently in Midtown, like where are the trees there? You know, that was all public stuff that was put up, but, you know, not a lot of trees put up there. So, you know, I think all of that has to be borne in mind, you know, with this proposal. People are concerned. I saw a lot of comments.
Carla, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, we'll go on to, I don't see any other board questions. Jerry, you have another question? You're on mute.
I just want to come back to the statement that I really don't expect you to tweak what you've already done that much. But if you, in your purpose and intent section for this ordinance, and I assume it has one, put in some identifying areas, critical areas, like riparian areas, for example, okay? So that you recognize that those types of resources have far more importance than the general urban landscape. That maybe gives a group that is fighting a project room to maneuver legally down the road, as opposed to having a specific piece of the ordinance to hold, to fall back on. And that's certainly something you could put into your purpose statements and things. Wouldn't be a big deal. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on. I see some audience questions. We'll go on to Marlene Olson.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I used to be a advisory board member, and it's nice to see everybody. Jenny, this is just for you because I've already listened into this presentation on another NAB, and I know that Matt and I are going to follow up at some point, but you have older HOAs in your ward that are maintaining a lot of tree canopy and they're aging. And so my concern is that that we not get dinged for trees that aren't thriving, trees that we feel that have to be removed for the health of other trees and that sort of thing. And those trees certainly can't be replaced with one the same size. So like in Riverbend, we've got hundreds of trees here and the public really appreciates them. And I just wanted to say that ought to be taken into consideration, aging, public spaces, HOAs, that sort of thing. And that's all I had. I didn't really need a comment because we had talked a lot about this, but I just wanted to make Jenny aware of that.
Yeah, Mike, if I may, I appreciate that, Marlene. I'm really familiar with your HOA. It's lovely. It's just so beautiful, the canopy there. And I haven't read the ordinance draft yet. I'll be honest. I'm working through the council internal police audit, 260 pages. That's been my side reading, but I'm going to get into this really quickly and get the landscape in my head for the next iteration and look at it from that HOA perspective. So thanks, Marlene. And to Margot's point about, how can you hold someone accountable to what they say through the approval process? I heard a lot of that from Kelly, ongoing is, tightening up that what comes through on the plans, making sure that it's held for a long time. I think there's been an understanding, particularly in shopping center sites, that as those shopping centers age and they change hands, it's a free for all, things get cut down or whatever. And you are in an obligation as a commercial developer to hold on to that landscape coverage. And I think this is tightening that up. But I think Carla's points are good about the public right of way. I actually have a Reno Direct concern to put into the city about what I'm seeing out on the Midtown streets in terms of the deterioration of that landscaping. But on the other hand, we've made a decision that we're not using transportation dollars to maintain landscaping, and it falls on the Parks Department. They are just not able to maintain what they're doing. So we have some maintenance issues that we need really to address in terms of public right-of-way landscape maintenance. So that's another piece of that, not related to this ordinance, but a bigger decision of how we use our transportation dollars to maintain or to just build new roads that we don't have the money to maintain.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you.
And Kathy Juarez. There you go.
Hi there. So I live on Marsh Street in the Old Southwest, which has an amazing tree canopy. And I have multiple residences on this street. And I feel like I've been in battle with urban forestry forever, trying to maintain my trees alive because they want to cut them down mostly, or they want to trim them so that they won't survive. So my question is, I had two huge ash trees that the urban forestry people wanted to cut down. I begged them to leave them because it would totally change Marsh Avenue if they cut those two trees down. I paid out of my pocket a lot of money to have them treated for what they, because the people who owned the house before I didn't water well. And so the trees have survived. I need to have the trees trimmed. I got a price for $1,000 to have the trees trimmed. I finally talked, the urban foresters or the city of Reno was going down the street. I finally talked him into trimming my trees at no cost. But the cost of keeping these trees alive is large. I had a huge spruce in my own front yard, which was trimmed because we have the power lines going down the street, which impedes the tree growth. And so they shaved down one entire side of my spruce tree and it ended up killing this tree. So we don't have any alternatives for fighting these. I mean, I had no notice that this was going to happen to my spruce tree until they showed up and trimmed down the whole side of my tree. And so I have a question. What about putting utilities underground? So we have the biggest tree canopy in the whole city in the old Southwest, but we are constantly embattled with our trees and how the trees are pruned in order to provide safety for the electrical system. So is there anything allowed for that? And is there anything to help us preserve these trees? Because they're huge. Our trees are all huge.
Kathy, great questions. And I'm gonna speak to part of it first, and then I'll kick it over to our urban forester, Matt Basil. Just a question about undergrounding utilities. You know, that's something that's been, that's come up at various times through approvals of various projects. I am certainly not an expert on it, but my understanding is that generally speaking, you know, undergrounding of electrical utilities can be incredibly costly. And that is a cost that is generally required to be spread among the ratepayers. So something that would be, you know, spread across city residents. I am not aware of any existing efforts, certainly for some of that existing infrastructure in that area. It might be worth you know, if that is a long-term issue with some of those Nevada energy power lines, it might be worth a follow-up conversation with them as well. I know certainly, you know, the safety component of that is very important. You know, we don't want to, you know, we certainly don't want to see any kind of conflicts between utility lines and trees that may lead to a fire. So certainly the trimming part of that is important to make sure that the community as a whole remains safe. Now, when it comes to potential assistance with maintaining some of those trees, that's the piece that I'm going to turn over to Mr. Basil, our urban forester, and see if he can speak to.
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. You know what, I'll just, if I could just take a step back and answer a couple of previous questions as well. Just the first one was from Marlene about the HOAs. And Marlene and I, we did chat at a different NAB. So plan is for me to come out there and take a look at some of the trees out there and give some recommendations. But kind of to answer Marlene and Carla's concerns about single family residential units, those are exempt from the code. So or at least from the proposed code as it is right now. So single family residential units would not be you know, covered under the mitigation requirements for trees that are to be removed on on private parcels. The focus is really has been on some of the bigger commercial units and industrial properties where we see a lot of trees that are installed and then not irrigated and die, or they get topped and kind of destroyed. So so that's been our focus so far, although we have heard a lot of concerns about possibly expanding into the you know, some of the PUDs and some of the different developments where we do want to maybe try and encourage more tree canopy there. To touch on some of Kathy's concerns, any of the trees that are in the parkway, the city does maintain as far as trimming and removal and any of those kind of activities. So, and the way we do that is generally through Reno Direct. So if you call into Reno Direct, it's 775-334-INFO or 4636, and just submit a request. And then we come out and we'll meet with you and schedule any work that needs to be done, including trimming, such as the ash trees that you noted. Up until in kind of in our recent history here, we haven't done any plant health care as far as treating trees with, for different pests or diseases or anything. That's one of the things that I'm working on now, is expanding our plant health care program. So treating some of our trees, such as the ash trees that there's a lot of them, especially in the Old Southwest, that are infested with Western ash bark beetle that's been killing a lot of those trees. So we are working on some solutions to try and retain some of those nice large ash trees that we have. I noticed you did bring up that your spruce tree was trimmed, and it sounded like maybe that was NV Energy that trimmed the tree. I didn't quite get exactly all the details there, but we do work with NV Energy extensively, especially in the Old Southwest, where there is a lot of power lines and conflicts between the lines and the trees. And unfortunately, there is a lot of trimming that NV Energy does to eliminate the possibility of fires or power outages and things like that. And we do have a pretty good relationship with them. Unfortunately, they tend to be resistant to putting their utilities underground. I think it's very cost prohibitive to do that. In general, that's not something that we see them do a lot of. And I don't know if there's a whole lot of push from the city to make that happen. But we've kind of set up a nice program with NV Energy to where, especially trees that are large trees like elms and maples and ash that are under the power lines, and NV Energy comes and kind of makes them look all butchered when they cut them away from the lines. We did set up a program with them where we can remove those trees that are kind of inappropriate for under the power lines and replace them with a more appropriately sized, smaller ornamental tree. So that's one of the ongoing programs that we've been doing to deal with trees in the power lines. And I think that touched on everything, unless you have any other concerns you'd like me to touch on.
Well, so my concern is how they trim the trees, which is kind of like a all or nothing kind of approach to trimming the trees, which is not good for the trees.
Right.
And so if we're trying to increase the tree canopy, the Old Southwest has the biggest tree canopy in the whole city. So is there not a way to approach this? I mean, our street, Marsh Avenue, it was scheduled to be repaved this year. Last year or year before last, I guess the year before last, they put in a huge new water main. They dug up the whole street to put a huge water main. They could have put underground utilities in at the same time. So can there not be any coordination between different entities to make this happen?
That's a great question. I think one example you brought up was in Midtown on Virginia Street there. That was one instance where NV Energy did go ahead and put those utilities underground. That was, for anyone else who kind of worked on coordinating it, that was quite a heavy lift to get to coordinate with NV Energy to make that happen. And that's, I would consider that kind of a extreme instance, that something very unusual that would take place. I don't know all of the intricacies of, the costs and whatnot associated with moving those utilities underground, but I do know that it's prohibitively expensive. I mean, you would think you have a good point that when they're doing the water lines and the sewer lines and everything else, that it makes sense to do it at that time. But I think as far as the logistics and costs of that, unfortunately, I don't have the answers for, when that's appropriate.
Matt, to interrupt you, I think I don't want this conversation to get confused with what the ordinance is going to do.
Sure.
And so I think the clarity of the answer to Kathy is about the utilities, Kathy. I've always viewed that as more of a franchise matter with the city of Reno when they negotiate with Nevada Energy to be the exclusive energy provider to the city. And so I think the topic is in there. I mean, it's somewhat related to, and I live not far from you, and I've had trees, meet their demise because of that, along alleys. So I hear you, but I think it's really, it's not its subject in this ordinance because it's really an issue related to the energy code. I understand the rights of way and the franchise agreement, and maybe we'll have through Amy do some research to report back at our next NAB meeting the status of the energy agreement with Nevada Energy, because there certainly is a way the city could, through that, at some point earmark money for undergrounding in association with projects if it is something that is negotiated. But at this point, it's really going to be absorbed in a public works project cost. And the only times I've seen that is on big corridors. So you just wanted to be clear on that, because I don't want Kelly's life to be complicated by people having an understanding or an impression that the ordinance captures these other things that are very valuable issues to discuss, but it's really not, when the council looks at it, going to be one of the provision that gets dropped into ordinance.
No, I understand. But this has been an issue of mine for a very long time because I've lived here for a long time. And I saw on my bill, it was a few years ago, how we had to pay for underground utilities for outlying areas. And I was like, why don't we have underground utilities here?
Yeah.
So
okay.
It was a sore point.
Okay.
So we'll move on now. So we'll go on to the next speaker. Thank you, Kathy.
If I could just ask Kelly a quick question.
Gary. Hang on. Gary.
Kelly? Yes.
You hang on just a second. I want to get through the other people that have had their
Okay,
hands up.
sorry.
That's okay.
I
We'll come
thought
back.
you were moving on.
All right, so Patty Carr is next. All right, Patty disappeared. Naomi Dewar.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, thanks for just letting me speak. As a councilwoman, I'm liaison to the Urban Forestry Commission. And so I've tried to attend all of these meetings and listen in to the key points that are raised so we can work with the Urban Forestry Commission to address or not address the issues that come up. I wanted to just quickly address a few of the questions. Just to go to this issue of undergrounding, for years, I was working with MV Energy on the franchise agreement. We brought it up numerous times. It was like the key seminal issue. They are required to underground in new developments. So just so you know, new developments do require that. The cost is upfronted by the developer, but it is spread over. Much of it is refunded to them through rates that we all pay. So I discussed with them expanding the undergrounding in other areas, and they do have a program. In fact, they started in Las Vegas on areas the city wanted to see undergrounded, and they thought we would want in the area of the city plaza, and I said, probably not. It would probably be older areas where we have a lot of trees. And I recommended exactly what you recommended, which was to, as we're opening up for sewer lines or other kind of utilities tearing up roads, that we should do the undergrounding then, as the systems are coming open. So that is going to come back around this year, probably as we continue negotiating on the franchise agreement. To Councilman Breckus's point, I have not been in conversation with them for the last 2 years. So we stopped with COVID, and I expect we'll be beginning again, just to kind of put that in the parking lot. But I think you bring up some excellent points. On the question about, someone else brought up a tree. Can we get, can we get some help with our trees? And one of the things that hasn't been mentioned that is included in this ordinance, not only are individual private homes, such as in the Old Southwest, exempted from this ordinance, but if you had a landmark tree, this new ordinance would allow you to submit it for landmark status and be able to potentially use Relief Reno funds to help maintain that tree. You pointed out $1,000 cost to trim the tree. And we know that as these trees get bigger, they're a good benefit to the city, and potentially we could help take care of those. So even if they are on private property. So we're looking at that. Another point that was brought up was about riparian areas. And I want to explain, one of the important things that the city did was take cottonwoods and other trees that are more riparian trees off of a prohibited list. We didn't want people to get the impression that if they were on some list, they should go cut down all their cottonwoods, or we don't care about the cottonwoods. We do. They're not recommended for planting. To your point, Mr. Wager, there aren't that many riparian areas. And these trees were either planted by ranchers that lived here long ago or self-seeded. And so they're here. And so we'd like to keep them here, as well as a lot of other species that may not be preferred to plant today. So what we've come up with is a prohibited tree list, which has about 2 species on. Matt could speak more to it. I think it's a tree of heaven and tamarisk. Another tree list that's not preferred for planting, that'll be in educational materials. And that does include, for example, cottonwood, willows, and some of those that would be in wetter areas or are very water consuming. And then a list that Matt has come up with the Urban Forestry Commission of trees, and it's hundreds of trees, different species that do well here and are supported and we'd like to see planted more of. We also recommend in the undesirable trees is no calorie pears, because apparently 10% of the trees planted, it sounded like in public spaces, are this one species of tree. So I just wanted to make those few comments. And just finally say, I so appreciate the attention today by the Ward 1 NAB members, as well as the public commenters, because all of this we're hoping to address the best we can without, as Councilman Breckus said, overweighting the ordinance to deal with all kinds of issues. We're at least hoping to deal with the seminal issues. So on that note, I just want to say that Kelly had hoped to get all the comments in today. Some of these I think should be put into writing. There's a space on this reno.gov/trees where you can just write a few comments right there, or you could upload a letter if you so desire. But unless you do memorialize your comments, they may not be fully captured the way that you would want them to be captured. And they won't necessarily be presented to the Urban Forestry Commission, the Planning Commission, or the City Council. So I encourage, if you've got some issues, even if it is undergrounding, or if it's riparian areas, or if it's landmark trees, or whatever it is, parking lot should have more trees, that you take just a few minutes and put those in on the comment page so that we can capture those things. So thanks for letting me comment. Hopefully I've answered a few of the questions and comments that have come up here today, in addition to those you already heard. Thanks.
All right, thank you for your time. We'll go back to Jerry.
And actually, Mike, I just want to point out that Patty is available to speak now for her comment.
And I'll jump to Jerry first,
Okay.
since I already called him, and then we'll go back to Patty.
Kelly, just a quick question. Is there anything in this ordinance that speaks to the issue of replanting after catastrophic fire? I'm thinking in terms of the most recent Pine Haven area.
Jerry, good question. You know, and what we've been realizing through the month of January as we've gone to all of these workshops and open houses is there are a lot of opportunities to add clarification to the draft code. So that is something that we heard from one of the previous meetings as well, that we are hoping to speak to a little bit more clearly in the next iteration. So thank you for bringing that up.
Right, so we're going back to Patty Carr, correct?
Patty, you're on mute. We can't hear you. Do you think you could unmute? And then Mike, I think we do need to move on to our next item after this.
I agree.
Patty, can you hit the unmute? There. Oh, wait, you
muted.
Yeah.
Unmute.
Can you hear me?
There you
Yes.
go.
Okay, so I'm way out of order because I submitted a question and I couldn't get on Zoom for a full hour. So I understand if you won't take it. It's a short question. It doesn't relate to trees at all. It relates to comments by Margot about development and where it stops and whether after an agreement is made, the developer can change what the agreement was. So let me ask the question. I understand if you say you can't do it now because I'm out of order. But I'm from, excuse me, 2845 Idlewild. And my question is about the new development at 2865 Idlewild, which is the 5 acre, roughly a 5 acre property. My question is there a limit to the number of units? I mean, because I've heard all different numbers and I wondered what is the maximal number of condominium residential units that can be constructed on an acreage, say?
Patty, I think that's going to be on the agenda a little bit, in a little bit, and we'll get a presentation. And there should be a city planner coming on board who can maybe outline to you what the development potential is under the zoning code for that property, or the considerations that dictate that. So can you just stay on a little bit longer then?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sure there are many people from my building on or trying to get on Zoom. So
Sure.
don't think that we're not interested because we can't get on Zoom.
Okay. Just stay on it. I'll turn it. Mike's the chair and we'll move on.
I'll keep an eye out for your hand raised when we get to that. So let's move on to item B2, discussion of climate resiliency and infrastructure priorities. This is for information only.
But this is me. Did we do I'm sorry, Mike, what about the one about the Portland, the bathrooms? Is that on afterward?
I don't see it, Jenny.
Oh, it's not on? Okay. Well, in terms of that, just to anyone who's listening, I know we have a lot of people on, is the Ward 1 NAB likes to be self-directing the issues that we discuss. And this has been a longstanding practice. We really appreciate, opportunities to give input on, citywide issues like the trees ordinance, but they're having a lot of separate outside public meetings on that. And rather than Ward 1 just being a place for people to make the rounds on their issues, the Ward 1 NAB early on decided they wanted to talk about infrastructure in our aging neighborhoods and the changes that we feel coming forward with, the changing climatic conditions. So to that end, I did want to bring up infrastructure. Very interestingly, this council, the Public Works Department, did issue a contract for some just isolated sidewalk repair. And I've been seeing a fair amount of that going on right now in portions of Southwest Reno. The real deteriorated sidewalks that aren't in association with street projects, the real trip and falls. And and it's been interesting to watch over the last couple of weeks because I don't usually see that kind of work going on in January, but I think they're able to do it. And I haven't seen any concrete pouring, but I've been seeing breaking out of a lot of panels in different areas. So that's something that's going on right now. And I'm really excited to see some of our 60, 70-year-old sidewalk panels in the neighborhoods getting replaced. So I'd urge you to keep an eye out on those. One other thing, and I was going to share my screen, but maybe I won't since we're moving on, and it's no longer in Ward 1. But if you remember, Ambassador Way up in Northwest Reno got redone a couple of years ago, and there was a ditch that crossed Ambassador Way and a bike path that went there. And it's rather a straight shot road from I think Charlins to Mayan or Robb, kind of winds around. So serves as a collector through that neighborhood. And there was a traffic calming device that got taken out. Really, really wanted it to go on right where those walkers and runners and bike riders were crossing that collector road. And it just got installed. So I was really excited to see that Ambassador Drive now has, this improvement that's a safety one. And that's the big challenge in a lot of these older neighborhoods is how to retrofit for safety when you build overly wide roads, because that's what the engineers did in the 70s, 80s, and sometimes in the 2020s in Reno, Nevada. But anyway, that's no longer Ward 1, but I'm excited about that. I had a meeting 2 weeks ago with a woman who is like the director of all the Western state forests and, kind of high up in the Forest Service level about concerns that I've heard about management plans up onto the Mount Rose, Toyobe section of the forest. And it was a good conversation. They would be supportive of redoing some of their management plans, activity plans for those portions if they felt there would be community support. And this is to get at the issues that I increasingly hear from up in Collin about off-roading, fires, shooting, the threats of feeling so fire vulnerable and knowing that, activities on the forest could, cause devastation. Unfortunately, the devastation has been caused by those Nevada Energy above ground lines, but had a meeting that I reported back to you about Nevada Energy and what they're doing to harden that line. And the Forest Service is also working with Nevada Energy to harden that line that comes out of Collin, that goes across the flank of Mount Rose out to the Thomas Creek area. But they would be supportive of that. And I've reached out to the Collin Ranch HOA to see if they would sign in a letter of support. The Forest Service is woefully outdated in their management plans for each of the different forests. And the Toyobe, as you may know, is the largest in the continental USA, largest forest. And part of the vulnerability of Reno is not only the section of the Toyobe, but also then we've got the Tahoe forest. So we have two forest boundaries right here. But going to continue conversations with the foresters about how they can do rulemaking and go through a public process to address those concerns that might exist up there. And I certainly do hear them from Collin quite a bit. So that, and then the next day after the meeting that I had with the forester, the Forest Service announced an enormous commitment of federal resources to do forest thinning and forest management in some Western states. Nevada is not one of them. California certainly is. And that's great because while those forests that are really loaded up there aren't as direct threat to us, they are the cause of our deteriorated air quality when they're burning up. So I think as Nevadans, we need to be very supportive of California forest management. And I was really pleased to see that's something that's going on. So if there's aren't any other questions or comments on resiliency and infrastructure, maybe very soon we'll run down a few other projects next time, like the Arlington Avenue Bridge and the timing on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Any board questions for Jenny on this subject? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to item B3, present. This might be what you talked about earlier, Jenny, but presentation, update, and discussion regarding the One Truckee River Management Plan, including the River Restroom Project and Vegetation Management Plan. This is for information only.
Hello, I'm Iris Jaley Papard, the Executive Director for One Truckee River, OTR as I will refer to it. Thank you for the opportunity to present about One Truckee River and the River Restroom Project. One Truckee River is a nonprofit that manages a coalition of public and private partners who work together to strive for OTR's mission within the complexity of their agency's priorities to ensure a healthy and thriving river connected to its community. Listed on the screen are some of our partners. Our guiding force is our partnership council with 22 local agencies represented that meet quarterly, and our board of directors, 7 dedicated residents that meet monthly. Our staff efforts focus on supporting partners to do more for the river by sparking collaboration and supporting the fundraising process for implementation. Starting in 2013, over the course of many years, the OTR partnership developed through conducting many collaborative in-depth meetings, retreats, and forums focused on the challenges and opportunities that exist connected to the river with local agencies, nonprofits, and residents. In 2016, the One Truckee River Management Plan was approved by the 3 jurisdictions and the Western Regional Water Commission. The partnership created 4 goals. Goal 1 is focused on water quality, Goal 2 on a thriving environment, Goal 3 on education, and Goal 4 on long-term management. At the end of 2017, OTR's Partnership Council prioritized 9 out of 103 action items in the OTR management plan. The next 3 slides share these action items per goal. Goal 1 has 4 action items prioritized listed. For the sake of time, I will not give an update for each one, but you can find more information on our website at onetruckeeriver.org under our work. For Goal 1 here, I will mention the completion and approval by Nevada Division of Environmental Protection of the 2020 Integrated Source Water and 319H Watershed Protection Plan for public water systems and the Truckee River in the Truckee Meadows. The completion of this plan was led by the Truckee Meadows Stormwater Permit Coordinating Committee. It is a live document publicly available at washoecountycleanwater.org listed on the screen. Under Goal 2, we have 3 action items prioritized listed. For this goal, I will mention the completion of a multi-jurisdictional signage project that installed 250 plus signs, including maps, directions, rules, stewardship, and interpretive signs along the river, led by Nevada Land Trust. I will note here that there are no prioritized action items under Goal 3 at this time. Goal 4 has 2 prioritized action items listed. For this goal, I will mention the completion of transitioning OTR from its past fiscal agent to its long-term home, the Truckee River Foundation. Now I will share details on action item 1.3.c focused on increasing public restrooms along the Truckee River. Out of this action item, the Truckee River Restroom Project was developed. Factors that moved the OTR partnership to prioritize the project included concern of human impact on water quality and the growing recreational need along the river, with our region's forecasted growth of 120,000 plus new residents by 2035. OTR recognizes public restrooms are a basic building block of a complete functioning public park. By improving public spaces for everyone, restrooms build community resilience, increase urban renewal, and improve public health. OTR's vision is to connect residents and visitors to unparalleled opportunities for recreation. Access to public restrooms support this vision. In 2018, OTR's Housing and Sanitation Working Group that included representatives from the 3 jurisdictions, Community Foundation of Northern Nevada, Downtown Reno Partnership, and local residents researched restroom options and conducted multiple interviews with local cities, staff, and elected officials. The project gained a lot of engagement and financial support from our partners and collaboration with other relevant regional stakeholders listed on the screen. In 2019, the project phase 1 to 4 was proposed with the goal to add 10 new public restrooms, an increase from 9 to 19 along the Truckee River stretch from Lake Tahoe to Pyramid Lake, which includes proposed locations in the city of Reno, city of Sparks, and Washoe County. Listed on the screen are public meetings where the project was presented and steps forward approved. Support letters for the project's first restroom installation was collected by local businesses, including the Courtyard Marriott and Reno Aces. In 2020, the city of Reno coordinated with Truckee Meadows Water Authority to install the project's first new public restroom along the river at Broadhead Park in August 2020. Data was collected a month before and since its installation to determine the successes and challenges of the project. From August 2020 to September 2021, there have been 12,112 flushes at the restroom, which is an average of 30 flushes per day. Through December 2021, from agencies that maintain the loo, there have been 7 minor incidences that involve vandalism, including graffiti and issues with the door lock. All minor damages were quickly repaired. For the city of Reno, during the 18th month period, there were 15 calls for service in Broadhead Park, in which one of the following keywords were included in the call detail: Portland loo, restroom, bathroom, or toilet. The total estimated staff time the calls required represents approximately 0.1% of the city's total staff duration over 18 months. Overall, community response for the new restroom facility has been very positive, and the metrics show that phase 1 has been successful. With support from Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, the second new restroom is proposed to be installed at John Champion Park in the city of Reno. OTR applied for funding for the third installation at Bicentennial Park following City of Reno guidance. The application is pending and a decision should be made this month. On the screen are regional plans that mention a need to increase infrastructure, public restrooms, and/or public facilities, including OTR's management plan, the updated City of Reno master plan, Reimagine Reno, the Truckee Meadows Trail Plan, the Washoe County Regional Transportation Commission Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan, and the Nevada Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreational Plan. Recently, the project secured letters of support from leaders within the Tahoe Pyramid Trail and Truckee Meadows Trails efforts. Now, OTR is focused on gaining more public input on the order to prioritize future locations through an online countywide survey that is active now until February 10th. Please go to onetruckeeriver.org's homepage to take the survey. And more City of Reno public meetings coming up where the project will be discussed is listed on the screen. Thank you.
For your time. Do we have any board questions? Margot.
I have some comments. I actually did do the survey, and in looking at this, I do not think Bicentennial Park along the river downtown is a great place. I don't think we should put these lavatories in a sculpture park. I've been to a lot of different jurisdictions where there are sculpture parks and they don't put restrooms right there. I'm also have done some research on it, and there's some cities that have found in certain areas of their city, and I think we need to look at this very constructively, that these have been magnets for drug dealing and drug users. And so I think there's got to be some way to make sure that there is police or something around there to prevent that from occurring. I do think some of the places that they've listed are fine for these restrooms. They were first started, I think, in Portland, but San Diego and other cities have found that there's a real problem too with homeless, with drug use and other things like that. So I'm hoping there's a way that the city or somebody in this organization can provide surveillance or whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't happen here.
Thank you. Anyone else from the board? See, we have one audience question. Art Rangel.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to commend One Truckee River and its affiliates for taking care of what in most cities is an incredible asset. When you have a river running through a community, you've got all kinds of opportunities, and we're seeing in Reno that we've kind of done that. Particularly, I want to mention I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Reno, and as you all know, our club has been asked by the city to participate, and we have, and we are the folks that kind of created with the city the bicentennial sculpture park. And now we spent well over $150,000, and every year our club contributes to the continued maintenance of that park. We've actually adopted part of the park for landscaping. That takes a burden off the city. And we think it's a showcase for folks. When I have people, and I live downtown, we walk there all the time. When I have people come in to visit, I always want to take them down there because it is a showcase. A place for families, a place that I think we should all be proud of. The thing that concerns me is that the Portland Loo is not just any bathroom. It's very different than other bathrooms. To Margot's point, is kind of designed around a particular demographic, and it is a homeless and substance abusers. So what I'm not sure, what bothers me is why the survey makes no reference to anything like that. When you say a restroom, you think, okay, it's just a restroom, but it's much, much different than a restroom. So I would appreciate if the survey included a bit of a description as to the differences between what the loo is and what a typical restroom is. And I agree. I mean, in the research I've done, there's been some cities that have actually taken them out because they've created more problems and they're considerably more expensive to install and maintain.
Thank you, Art. We'll move on to Marlene Olson.
Hi there. I'm also a member. Jenny knows this. I can't hide that I am a member of the Rotary Club and actually was the one that headed up the sculpture garden project and raised the money for it for 100th anniversary. So I think Art said everything I'd like to say about it, and so did Margot about, is this an appropriate place for it? But what I'm really bothered by is we're doing a bathroom survey, and Iris has already presented that the third location is going to go into Bicentennial. So why are we even having a survey? And will the survey be the results be considered in the next location? It just, I can't get over that right now. It seems like, we want public input, but yet it's already being directed on where these things are going. So maybe, Jenny, you could inform us on this.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Iris raised her hand. Iris, you want to respond to why you're doing public input now again?
Yeah, first I'll say that One Truckee River, we're a partner in this. And so we're very open to exploring different locations. We go we have to focus on what the property owners, being the jurisdictions, is guiding us to do, because they're one of our biggest partners. So I just want to make that clear, that that's where those are coming from. And, as it was said in the presentation, there's 10. John Champion is being voted upon, from my understanding, on February 23rd. So we've gotten everything in place for that one, but that is there. And then Bicentennial, I think, has a lot more to be worked out. And that also includes the funding. And so, there's a lot holding that. But I'll let the city of Reno speak now, but I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, Jamie won.
Sure. Thanks, Iris, and Councilmember Breckus. So for the record, Jamie Schroeder, Director of Parks and Recreation. So this process is pretty lengthy. And so even though there's a proposed list of locations, it does not necessarily mean it's a done deal. So as Iris had mentioned, this is sort of a partnership in which, the city of Reno and Sparks and Washoe County don't necessarily have the time or the resources to put restrooms along the river. However, with One Truckee River and Tumwa recognizing the need for increased public restrooms along the river, the partnership becomes one that is mutually beneficial. And so the locations are certainly proposed and recommended based on infrastructure, based on pedestrian flow, and then again, sort of, it's one of those recommendations that staff's making. But ultimately, before we can truly move forward, it does have to get approved by council, because the city of Reno is not necessarily putting in the restroom. It's in partnership with Truckee Meadows Water Authority and One Truckee River. So there'll be an interlocal agreement that gets brought forth before council. And I just mentioned John Champion is the next one that fits and makes sense to put a restroom in. There's really not any surrounding infrastructure that folks would be able to use otherwise. And so we'll bring that forward to council. Similar to Broadhead Park, because these restrooms are a different way of thinking, there is a clause in there that says if the restroom becomes a nuisance, then the city of Reno has the right to have them removed out of that location. But in this instance, it's just really important to reiterate that the survey and the input is taken into consideration, that we just have to have a starting point based on locations that actually have the potential to be able to put in a restroom, and does it make sense? And so now we're at that part of making sure that we collect public input to also take that into consideration before we finalize the locations.
Jenny, you want to go ahead, or Iris? Either you guys can fight over this.
No, I think they have their survey instrument out there. I think people should respond to that. I'll leave for a different time a question of whether or not a survey is a good approach, or just have a series of open meetings on a plan and then move forward on budgeting those at each one, at the council. I do want to kind of hit the issue on the head is, I've supported this effort all along, both at Tumwa and the city council. We need bathrooms along the river. We need them to, for water reasons. We need them for those of us who are recreating. Once a month when I ride my bike, down towards Droskar, I stop in the bathroom in Idlewild. I feel safe in that one. I probably would not be selecting to use the Broadhead Park one at this time, and the Virginia Lake one that I've used in the past, either at this point. It's been a while since I've been in there, but bathrooms go in for a long time and the circumstances change, and you need bathrooms, particularly as you start to realize the different needs of everyone in your community, the elderly, the young, and so on. So we got to get there. The problem I'm seeing absolutely on this issue, which kind of caught me a surprise at Tumwa when one council member had one position and another council member had another position, is evidently between Bicentennial Park and Civic Plaza, we do need a bathroom, especially because the council decided not to put one in the ground floor of City Hall. and where to put it. You know, some people wanted someplace, some people wanted others. It seemed like the pivot was over to Bicentennial Park. I understand the Rotary concerns. I was a little hesitant also when they marked it out and showed me where it was going. But I think it's really a problem that we have no clear plan of what we want to do at Civic Plaza, where the bathroom should go. We throw everything in there. Maybe the bathroom gets thrown in there. If you've gone by there before, it looks like my daughter's bedroom when she was in middle school, just everything thrown out there. Maybe another bathroom won't do it. And we really don't have a plan for West Street Plaza either, one where I've tried to put some council donations. And the big thing hanging out there is the Arlington Avenue Bridge is going to get done very soon. And I've tried to say, let's redo Wingfield, because it's the time to do Wingfield. Now, the bathroom need when Arlington Avenue Bridge is out of service is going to be even greater, because there's bathrooms at the Barbara Bennett Park, which I would not use at this point in time unless I absolutely needed to, are going to be, you know, not as near for people. So we'll wrap this up, I think, on this one, where to put the downtown bathroom question. Maybe it's in the City Hall parking garage. I don't care. I think we do need one down there. It'll ultimately be a decision of the manager, what he wants to recommend to the council, but take the survey, look at all the other ones, and support Iris in her efforts, because we need bathrooms along the river for everyone. Thank you.
Chris?
Okay, I just wanted to speak of the concern of drug use and nefarious activity. And I think that, as you mentioned, is more of a concern in some locations than others. The issues where there are concern for that include Broadhead Park. You know, we've done a lot of different collaborations and efforts to address that. And I am aware of the Portland Loos in cities that have not been successful. Do I know all of the details of why they did not succeed? No, but I do believe that the devil is in the details. And so I want to just briefly share that we've partnered with Karma Box Project and Washoe County through Truckee River Fund to have a river stewards program that are folks that are from that environment that clean up the river, take care of the loo, address issues when they come up, and are our allies that are there to have eyes on the facility and to also increase the nature, the expectation of respecting public facilities and the Truckee River. Now, that doesn't kind of happen overnight, but I will say that that is one of the strongest things that I think has supported the loo at Broadhead Park to be successful. And we're leveraging on that. We're looking to do restoration planning and hopefully implementation at that park. And so these restrooms are just the beginning of hopefully revitalizing some of these parks. And so I just want everybody to be aware that we're not naive or ignoring those issues, but we're actually have in our strategy with these restrooms a way to try to address those concerns. And then also back to the survey, I know it's confusing because we already have some in plans, but it became evident that people had a lot of input on this. And so One Truckee River is just trying to do our part to gain public input to then share that with the jurisdictions.
Thank you. I see Marlene had her hand up. It's down now, so.
The only thing I'd like to strongly suggest is that City Plaza be considered. I mean, we need to have a successful in front of the public, you know, public bathroom. And I think you could create a lot of success with the eyeballs that would be on that location. And people hang out there, a lot of people. So I hope that's considered as well. That's it.
Thank you. I see Art has his hand up again. Art?
Yeah, I just want to, I would agree with that, City Plaza, because it appears as if this Portland Loo is kind of in the experimental stages right now, given where it's not. I'm down in LA right now, and there's not one down here. And we got one, you know, and there's San Francisco doesn't have any. The ones in San Diego have had issues. So it seems to be experimental. So City Plaza seems to be a really obvious place to me. City staff can just look down there and see how effective it is or isn't. And then they can make decisions as to this particular type of restroom throughout the community. And one other thing, there already are restrooms directly across the river from Bicentennial Park. Just, to Arlington Bridge and you're there. So I don't understand why proximity, one restroom to another, just across the river, 100, 200 feet. When we need them further down the river, which is, and again, considering the demographics it's supporting, further down to the, by the care center makes complete sense to me. City's done an incredible job along with the city of Sparks and the county to take that issue to a certain spot where there's services. And that's a spot like that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And I see Iris has her hand up. Jamie has her hand up. Jamie was up first, but Iris, if you're going to reply back to what he was saying, then go ahead. Or were you adding something else?
I just want to mention that we're not sold on the Portland Loo altogether, and we are exploring the public restroom company that is a local Nevada company. And I'm aware that they are the ones that have sold a lot of restrooms in the LA area.
Thank you. Jamie.
And then I just wanted to add that to the comments about City Plaza as a location to look at, that is on the list. I know we flew through the presentation pretty quickly, but the locations that are proposed for within the city of Reno boundaries, City Plaza is one of those locations as well. So we are looking at it, and it may just be a matter of timing of when funding comes available and different dynamics as far as being able to do implementation of the different phases.
And if I could just close and say, Civic Plaza absolutely needs a master plan. I mean, the Believe statue went there, then the whale went there, then there's skating things, and now the fire park's there. I mean, it's just, sometimes spaces, and you learn this in urban design studio, work well because they're just chaotic, organic. Sometimes they work poorly, but that one needs a little more attention and an overall master plan, in my view, but it should actually absolutely have a bathroom too. So thank you. And I guess we're ready to move on, Mike.
Thank you, Jenny. We are going to move on. I see no other hands up. So we're going to move on to development items, which is B4. So we're going to move on to item B4.1, Jacobs Globe Plaza and Festival Area.
Let's see, before we start, do we have a city planner present to characterize this request? Amy?
I am looking to see, sorry, on my participants, who the city planner is.
That's okay, Amy. Sometimes they seem to show up, sometimes they don't. So with that, I guess
I think I found him.
Okay. Who is it?
Joy Winter.
Okay, I don't know him, but
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's the city planner.
Joey, yeah. Okay, I don't know Joey, but welcome to Ward 1 NAB, Joey. And if you are the city planner, can you explain what this request is?
Oh, I'm wrong, actually. I'm sorry. Different Joey. I'm getting the right person here in just 1 second. It's actually Grace.
Grace. Okay. I do know Grace. And I just want to facilitate the discussion because there are questions about these applications.
All right, there she is.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, good evening. Sorry about that. Joey is actually one of our newer planners and he's shadowing this evening.
Awesome.
I think Garrett will give a brief overview. I'm not the planner on this project, but I can definitely answer any questions as far as procedures zoning and kind of what the process is. And then if there's any project-specific questions, I'd ask that the members direct those towards Nathan Gilbert, who's the planner on the project.
Well, Grace, why don't you read the description of the request? And I just want to help illustrate, because we have a good size audience here, maybe some who have never been involved in looking at this, that the description is really a key, gives you a lot of clues. So what is the description? Do you have a copy of the agenda?
Yes,
What is
on
it
my
really?
laptop, so I apologize for my back and forth. So it's a request has been made for a conditional use permit to allow amusement or recreation outside and live entertainment land uses to facilitate outdoor festivals, concerts, recreation, and events. The 2.32 acre site is located on 7 parcels, generally located south of West 4th Street, east of Washington Street, and 200 feet west of Ralston Street. The site is zoned mixed-use downtown northwest quadrant and has the downtown mixed-use master plan land use designation.
Okay, so just for, to facilitate understanding is, you explained to us a lot of geography, which helps people mental map it, go visit it, know how close it is to where they are. You called it a conditional use permit. So that's the nature of the approval they're getting. And who issues these conditional use permits?
Planning Commission.
And how long are they valid for?
So typically they run for the life of the project. So we'll see these for businesses, and they'll run for as long as that use is in operation.
But how long, when you get the approval, do you have for the approval to stay valid before it expires if you don't build it?
So we usually work these into our conditions. I believe it's typically 18 months.
Okay, and then maybe sometimes there's requests for extensions, but in 18
Correct.
months, if they don't build it, they can expire it, sell the property, and let something else be built on the property that it is allowed with the zoning, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's just the outline I wanted to explain to everyone. And then you called it a live entertainment something?
Live entertainment, amusement, or recreation outside. Those
Okay.
are the uses that are defined in our zoning code.
Sure, the activity, the land use to which they want to deploy on this property. So great. Now I think it would be good to hear from the project applicant to explain what he's going to be asking of the Planning Commission.
Mr. Chairman, is that my cue?
That is your cue. Go ahead, Garrett.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chairman, Councilwoman Breckus, members of the NAB, it's a pleasure to be before you tonight. My name is Garrett Gordon. I represent Jacobs Entertainment. And if I can share my screen here, we'll be giving a brief presentation on the proposal. So before you tonight is a presentation to solicit input on the Jacobs Glow Plaza and Festival area. Existing conditions. So the current site is located on the block that is bordered by West 4th Street to the north. To the west is Washington Street. To the east is Ralston Street. And then to the south, which is not a part of this proposal, and these properties are currently not owned by Jacobs, is the Saracen Arms project. That is subsidized housing owned and operated by the Reno Housing Authority. Those 60 units are, again, affordable units that will maintain and exist and are located in the district, as well as the Courtyard project here next to the Saracen. Again, 240 subsidized units owned by a third party, not Jacobs, in the middle of Reno's Neon Line district. The proposed site we're talking about tonight is about 2.5 acres, a little under. Existing zoning, as you heard Grace say, is downtown mixed use, which certainly encourages downtown entertainment and tourism and local entertainment options. And it's made up of about 7 parcels that would be consolidated for this proposal. So what's being proposed? oh, let me take a step back first. You can see the existing site is currently vacant except for this area here along 4th Street. And that, if you've driven by lately, or maybe even attended an event last summer, is the Glow Plaza, which is the first step to a many-phased development, Reno's Neon Line District. The Glow Plaza was erected last year. There was actually plans to call it the Sands Connect and move forward 2 years ago, but with COVID and the limitation on social gatherings, it was delayed, but opened up last year. Very exciting to get people back to be comfortable, to coming downtown on West 4th Street to recreate, to get some food, to get a drink, to hear some music right there on West 4th Street. So last year, the Glow Plaza opened. There were 22 events from July through September 2021, so 11 weeks of events. There was live music every Friday and Saturday night, approximately 100 to 150 persons at each event. Again, each event got a little bigger. Word of mouth was very positive. Yelp was very positive. You can see here some pictures of the stage and some acts and folks hanging out, having a drink in the Airstream bar that the Sands provided, as well as some licensed food trucks that kind of changed week to week. Again, just getting momentum to having locals come downtown to West 4th Street again and to enjoy the area. So this was such a success. We're now moving forward with the festival space. So you can see here, the Glow Plaza is here on 4th Street, and the idea is to expand it into a larger outdoor entertainment festival space. You can see here on the west side of the project would be a large stage that could accommodate any sorts of acts, along with pavers, trees, landscaping, turf, really just a great place for folks to come downtown Reno and socialize, enjoy a concert, enjoy a show, enjoy a festival. Along with, we did get some feedback during the Glow Plaza last year about shade. That definitely needs some shading structures kind of in the later part of the day. Certainly in Reno, it can get pretty hot. So there'll be a very large shade structure over here as part of the project. Might be some food trucks underneath it, or a bar, or just a place for people to kind of congregate and get out of the heat. So very exciting to open up. I think there was a question, or Councilman Breckus mentioned, when we would have to initiate construction. It is true 18 months, but I can say we'd like to commence construction this spring. We already have our building permit in for this project. Of course, it can't be finalized until we move forward with, unless we move forward with this use permit and it gets approved. But it will get built if approved. And again, acts as soon as hopefully this summer, this fall, move forward with an exciting new downtown entertainment area. As mentioned, there is a request for a conditional use permit. There's two elements of it. One, outdoor entertainment, outdoor amusement or recreation triggers a use permit, as well as live entertainment. So that we've bundled those together and come to you for feedback, and then go to the Planning Commission for a decision in March. Here's another view. Again, you have Reno's Neon Line. If you've been up and down 4th Street lately, you can see it. This wall, neon line, starts at Arlington, West Street, moves westbound over Arlington, down 4th Street, and eventually be connected in the Keystone. I drove by the other night on the way up from a Nevada basketball game, and the lights were working great, different colors, color coordinated, pretty cool. Along with this artwork that's been installed, we have the Burning Man polar bear, along with a number of replica signs, and with that LED neon theme that goes with Reno's Neon Line District. So we are expanding the Glow Plaza, new shade structure, new stage, new pavers, landscaping. We'd ask for 20 events per year at the festival area, up to 1 to 4 days per event. This is a 24-hour mixed use zone. So we would have the right to operate 24 hours by right, just by zoning code. But I think we can all agree 24 hours a day for 20 events might be a little long. So we proposed for those 20 events to go up to 11 o'clock at night, Sunday through Thursday, and then up to midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. So taking a step back from what's currently allowed in code. Acoustical consultant. So if we were surrounded by residential zoning, there would be some decibel levels we would have to comply with. But the fact that this is all mixed use, those decibel levels do not apply. But that said, we of course want to be good neighbors. So we hired an acoustical consultant who is out on the property and doing some testing of ambient noise, meaning what the current noise is of traffic on 4th Street, or airplane noise, or anything that happens on a day-to-day basis, versus what our noise would be. Certainly it's an entertainment area, entertainment district, kind of similar to the Italian festival that runs pretty late on West 4th Street, or Hot August Night, Virginia Street, or Hot August Nights on West Virginia Street, or Street Vibrations. So certainly just kind of expanding some entertainment options and venues in the downtown entertainment core. But we'll get that consultant information back. That'll be part of our presentation to the Planning Commission of what that consultant recommends. And each event will require a detailed security and operational plan. Each event will be a little bit different, so it's not like we can do one template of a security plan, one size doesn't fit all, but certainly working with police, fire, community development, all agencies for each event, making sure we have a robust alcohol sales and consumption program. Obviously, we don't want to be selling to minors, but we would want this to be family friendly. All ages would be allowed. Making sure we have an EMS plan, again, police and fire review to make sure we have a good queuing plan, a good access points, making sure it's a safe event. And then, of course, unfortunately, it's now a reality that we have to make sure we have a mass casualty incident plan, just where we are today in this world, but that will be part of it as well. Public outreach, very important. We're before you tonight. Look forward to input. Going to the Ward 5 NAB, given of its proximity to the area, to get that input. And then the Montage Homeowners Association. They've asked us whenever we move forward with a project downtown in the district to go to them and get their feedback. If there's any other groups that I didn't list, we're happy to go meet with them, let me know. But again, really excited about moving forward with this. And with that, there's another kind of overview of the replica signs, the stage, the shading, all the improvements. Look forward to a fun summer in downtown Reno, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Garrett. Grace, do you want to follow up with anything else?
Nope, I'm available for questions.
Carla has a question. Go ahead, Carla.
Oh, I'd be surprised if I'm the only one here. I have a few questions and a few concerns. First, very simple one. We were just talking about bathrooms. I don't see any on here. Where are they?
Great question. We will be providing restrooms. It'll probably depend on the size of the proposed event, big, small, depending on how many restrooms we will have, but we would include that in our operational plan that would we submit to the city for each event.
So you're bringing in porta potties?
There'd be some kind of porta potty or other, you've seen some where there's actually, like the Eddy has a good example if you've been there, where they're portable, but you kind of walk up and walk into and use them. So the design will be finalized, but that's a good point, and we'll make sure we incorporate it.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why you're not just putting them in there permanently, but I guess that's up to you as long as they're there. A couple of other concerns. I don't fully understand the zoning. You said it's 24 hours a day, mixed use, but this is not an indoor casino. You're talking about outdoor noise, and you just said that there's affordable housing next door. So you're potentially making a lot of noise, near where people are sleeping and living. The Nugget has an outdoor entertainment area, but they shut that down at 10 o'clock, to try to be good neighbors. Midnight, it seems late to me, and I don't know what your neighbors are going to think about that. And I also don't fully understand the zoning that it would allow outdoor entertainment that late.
Let me take a stab at that. So as mentioned, we're in a mixed use zoning district. So 24-hour operations are allowed. What we're trying to do is cut that back and add a condition that would be conducive to this particular operation. So that's what we propose to staff. And let me say that that's not written as a condition yet. Staff is still evaluating our proposal. I'm sure we'll take the input they hear from you tonight. We have some written responses we owe them later this week for them to analyze this and let us know what their recommendations are. So that was our proposal, but we'll hear back from staff. On the residential proximity issue, so I also did the use permit a couple years ago for the Eddy, and this came up that the Riverside housing there next to the Eddy, again, it was zoned mixed use, but it is residential, housing. And so you have to, legally, you don't have to comply with the decibel level, but obviously as a good neighbor, you want to. And so we build in some conditions there for what made sense to mitigate that issue. Here, we probably do the same thing. You see, we tried to put some trees on the south side to help mitigate noise, but we'll hear a lot more when we hear from this acoustical study of how much decibel levels will the neighbors hear, do they hear anything at all, and how that will work. I can say, to summarize, to actually conclude here, that we have spoken to some of the Saracen folks, and frankly, they seem kind of excited to be able to stand on their patio and listen to some music. But the goal here isn't rock concerts. The goal here isn't, Metallica coming out. A festival space, there's a taco festival, there's a Hot August Nights festival, just getting people to come downtown. So it will not be like a rock ticketed, rock concert or anything like that the Nuggets doing.
And is there anyone who from the city who can clarify that to me, the issue of, when I think mixed use 24 hours, I think of indoor bars, I think of casinos. Is there a precedent for like an outdoor entertainment space? Is the Eddy 24 is allowed to have people out there playing music 24 hours a day?
No, the Eddy is not, can you guys hear me for some reason? Okay. The Eddy is not permitted to go 24 hours by right. And so to clarify, the zoning would allow for it to be 24 hours. However, through review with staff and planning commission, there could be conditions placed on it with hours to be restricted to certain times of day. And that's definitely feedback we're looking to get from you guys through writing to Nathan Gilbert, the planner on the project, to see what you guys think is kind of in the realm of possibilities. And then additionally, we can place conditions on things like decibel levels once we get that acoustic study to see what's reasonable for this area.
Thank you. Let's move on. I see Naomi Dewar has her hand up.
It looks like you can hear me now.
We can hear you.
I'm not going to comment on this overall proposal. That will come later. But since I'm on this meeting related to the new proposed tree ordinance, and since the Neon Line, Jacobs Entertainment during their development agreement made a commitment to look at and implement a streetscape ordinance, so I'm on trees. I just have a few questions, Garrett, about that. There are some what we call London Plain Street trees on Washington Street, but they're not shown on your design. I just wanted to make sure. Washington Street is one of the side streets here, right?
That's correct. Washington's on the western border of this block.
So is that the one on this picture closest to us? I got disoriented with the various maps, but.
Correct. It would be here next along the stage area, behind the stage area.
So to my knowledge, those are public trees along the right of way. Are they to be retained, or is this drawing showing them to be taken down, or what's the story?
I'm not sure. Appreciate the question, Councilman Dewar. I will
check that out
into that tree issue and report back to you. Okay.
And then you have planted some trees, I think, along Arlington in the Parkway, and also on 4th Street along in a median parkway. My understanding is the ones in Arlington, which we appreciate you planting them all, but the challenge is that the ones in Arlington Parkway have mostly died, and are now gone. And it was a very good effort, but I think it speaks to the fact that they need maintenance and irrigation, just to the point of our earlier conversation about the new tree ordinance, because we are spelling out with some details about the irrigation. So I'd appreciate it. Not right now, you don't have to answer, but I'm looking, you know, to get those parkways addressed that are fronting on this section. Okay.
Okay, appreciate the input.
Okay. And then lastly, I'm asking about the streetscape ordinance, because again, in the development agreement, you committed to do that. And so now I think is the time, now that you're starting to develop the space. One question I had was, I know that you had a very narrow wall or the sidewalk along, again, I don't know what street this is on the left. Is that 4th or?
That'd be 4th Street, that's correct.
4th. So on 4th, you have a sidewalk, a little green strip, and then a wall, as I recall. So you have a drive lane, a green strip on this picture with a lamp and sidewalk. But this is all part of the streetscape. And you mentioned shade earlier, that the residents said it's really hot out there. If you plant the trees now, you know, as part of this, you know, that'll start doing what you want it to do. So I would just ask, you know, those 3 things on trees. I'm not going to talk about other issues, but I appreciate your attention to that and staff's attention to that as you move through this. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Let's move on. I see some board questions, so let's go on to Margot.
And listening to this proposal, and I listened to the 3 or 4 hours that we did a few weeks ago and also wrote a comment on it. But I would be my recommendation that nothing goes beyond 10 o'clock at night. It would be my recommendation that things be limited to 3 days a week. Obviously, the acoustical is going to be a major deal. And I also am under the impression that the 24-hour rule applies indoors, not outdoors, thus until 10 o'clock. I mean, I think maybe 10 in the morning, if you had some kind of project going, to 10 at night is plenty. And I also have some questions about traffic. When this is over, what's the traffic going to be on Arlington and on 4th Street, et cetera?
So, well, this is bordered by Washington and Ralston, right? So Arlington would be on the other side of the sands. What we've had our traffic consultant look at is, one, right, parking. Where would folks park if they decided to drive down here? And there's, just like if anyone came to the Italian festival or the Buffalo Chicken Wing Festival, there is ample parking downtown, especially over here on 4th Street, from Gold Dust West to the 2 Ralston lots that are adjacent to the property. You have Gold Dust West right up here to the northwest. You have all of the sands parking, and then you have the lot south of the sands, which allows parking as well. So hundreds, if not thousands, of spaces for parking. We also have an Uber pickup.
Excuse me, I was talking about traffic flow when you leave.
So that would be part of the security and operational plan that we submit with the city. They'd want to see where queuing would take place, and we don't envision it on any public right of way, but if we did, we'd have to get an encroachment permit. But they're also going to want to see access in and out, as well as, hey, if people are parking at Gold Dust and they're walking across 4th, there's currently a traffic calming device. Is that sufficient? So this isn't gonna, if you approve it, or planning commission approve this, it's not as if we could just go start operating. We still have to go through an operations plan with the city to address all those good concerns.
Okay, so my guess then the question is, under the conditional use permit, I understand that's a permanent thing that you have to do all of the time. So you're saying that all of this is going to move around?
So what the city would require for each event is they may try to treat it kind of like a special activity permit of, okay, you have 20 of them. What does this one look like? What are your hours? How many people do you expect? Where the food trucks are going to be, where are people going to park, where the Uber drop off and pick up will be located. So we'll have to work through those details at the administrative level for each of those 20 events.
So there's nothing you can put in the conditional use permit, like it'll be from 10 in the morning till 10 at night, that there will be Uber parking on X or Y area, and
We could absolutely do that, and we expect that. We expect to have conditions such as hours of operation, potential days that you can operate, whatever the acoustical consultant comes back with, maybe decibel levels, maybe orientation of the stage, maybe additional landscaping for noise mitigation, whatever that is. Yeah, all those type of elements will 100% be with the condition in this use permit and run with the land. But just the operational pieces of each event will be, and security plan will be worked out with the city.
And then I'm just curious if you know, what is the decibel range in Wingfield Park when they have concerts there?
What's allowed, or what's the actual noise that's being?
What's the actual noise? Because it doesn't seem to be all that loud.
You know, I couldn't tell you, to be honest, but this acoustical study will give us a good sense of what that looks like.
Okay, thank you.
We'll move on to Jerry next.
Yeah, I would like to echo the concerns. I think you indicated that there were over 300 units immediately adjacent to this, to the south, if I'm not mistaken. I assume a number of people living in those units would have small children. I mean, if this is going on till 10, 12 o'clock at night and you're trying to get small children to bed, it would seem to me a little problematic at best. The other issue is we just got through talking about trying to promote more trees. Shade's already an issue. Why aren't there trees scattered throughout this site? I don't see it's nice to beautify sidewalks, but the shade isn't really needed there. It's needed on site. So why can't you put trees throughout this site? Why does it have to be all hardscape? Particularly in areas where you've got picnic tables, for example. I don't see that one canvas covered structure provides much shade at all when you're talking about most of the site just baking. So why is it that it is totally treeless?
Appreciate the, I don't know if you can see this new screen. I don't know, I couldn't track down today from the architect the color version, so I'll send it to you. It'll be ready by Planning Commission. But here's the landscape plan. So you can see there'll definitely be trees located within the project. Certainly a number of trees located around the border of the project, as well as substantial landscaping, trees and shrubs here in this open space area. So it's a good point. I'll bring it back to the development team. Certainly the direction for more trees and more shade trees all over the project. It's a good point. But that we are over landscape that's required by code, but we can certainly try to do more for sure. It's a good point.
Well, I would think that it would enhance the overall aesthetics to have trees kind of placed throughout here and there, as long as they didn't impede movement and that type of thing. But particularly where you have picnic tables, for example, I would think people would really want shade in those areas as well.
Good. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I see one other audience question. That would be Art Rangel.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and Garrett's absolutely right about the hours of operation. Back in the day when the only people that spent the night in Reno were transient folks, either in a hotel or a motel, it didn't matter if there was noise all night and rowdiness. That was okay because they would go there and they'd leave. Today, just in the downtown condos, we have over 1,000 units, and there's another 2,000 to 4,000 more permanent units. These aren't transient; these are permanent people where they live. So really, the condos and the apartments that exist today and are coming down in the pipeline are really no different than a property that's zoned multiple family throughout the city. In those zones, these folks are protected. Here, we're not. Why? Because we're called mixed use. And yet the predominant use in these structures, especially the high rises, is residential. It's not commercial. So I just wanted to make that point. The issue that I've looked at, and Jared, you didn't mention how many participants would be in any one event. It's in the traffic analysis, but I've forgotten what it is.
As I understand from the architect, hey Art, nice to hear from you. The site, just from a fire occupancy load, can hold 6,500 people. But we're not doing ticketed events. So it's not as if we're going to sell 6,500 tickets to anything. It's more of a, festival area, festival grounds. People, move in and out throughout the 1, 2, 3 day event.
Okay, but the conditional use permit will have a limit on it. And by the way, the issue of hours of operation, that's really up to the city. That's not up to the applicant. The city can impose conditions of approval. That's what a conditional use permit is. You can have this approval, but there's under conditions. So the city can say, we're going to limit your hours of operation. That's only one issue. One of the big issues I have and looking at the traffic analysis is that it's not comprehensive enough. It only assesses this particular project, a part of the project. The project is the entire neon line, which puts it in the, and you can look at page for the NAB members. If you look at the Reno Annexation and Land Use Code, which you have access to on the city's website, look at pages 4-51 through 4-76. It has to do with traffic impact analysis. Specifically, the concern I've got is that, in my opinion, the project is of regional significance, which brings in a whole lot of things. I am a city planner, and I've worked on these things for some time. Typically, you don't just look at one little aspect of a project. You look at what's called the cumulative impacts of the project. In this case, the project is the entire neon line project. There are currently apartments being built into the downtown. There's the Commons that's under construction right now, 4,500 square feet of commercial space. All of those traffic impacts should be incorporated into the total analysis so that you have a true impact analysis, traffic impact analysis, instead of piecemealing it one by one by one, because individually they're insignificant over time. When you combine them, you have tremendous traffic impacts on the community. So that's one thing that I'm going to be bringing up that by the way, I presume this all goes to the Plan Commission, whatever happens here, or is it recorded, or how does the Plan Commission get this information before they, and I know we can review it, but do they get your minutes, or how do they, Jenny, do you know?
Yeah, maybe Grace can, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways you can provide comment. I know that them being virtual, I'm not quite sure how the NAB forms are being distributed, but you can submit public comment on our website. I can give you Nathan Gilbert's email in the chat. You can send comments to him, and you can also call in, and all of those comments will be incorporated into the Planning Commission staff report.
Okay, but I presume the city has traffic engineers. I mean, this is common planning principle, what I'm talking about, the cumulative impact of a true project, not just piecemealing it so that individually doesn't mean much, but at the end of the day, 3-4 years from now, you've got this huge impact. They really should be assessed because we know what's in the pipeline.
Well, just to let you know, Art, it is an outstanding question, just like, the litigation is a determination if it is a project of regional significance under our regional planning law. And that analysis going on right now with the director of Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency. My predecessor as the Ward 1 City Council member, Tony Harsh reached out to me right after the development agreement was reached and said, isn't this thing going to regional planning agency for review of conformity? That's not really a transfer, it can't really condition, but it's looking at impacts on regional resources. And, but the commons that you mentioned is outside of the neon line area.
Well, I'm just saying, but the true project is the total 20 blocks. And how could
Yes.
that not be of regional significance? I mean, to me, it's just common sense. It has to be.
Yeah.
This is just one small component.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
All right, thank you, Art. I'm gonna take one more question because we still have some other items we need to bring up tonight, and we've been doing this for quite some time. So the last question tonight will be Eileen Bidwell.
Hi, I was just wondering, what are your plans for disabled access? And also are you planning for a space for taxis to park and pick up passengers?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it'll 100% be ADA compliant. There's, to my knowledge, no stairs or anything like that, but we'll certainly comply with all other ADA ramping requirements as well. As far as parking, we envision where the Sands is located. If you go south of the Sands, there's the tracks. You go south of the tracks, there's a large open surface parking lot. That would be the designation for Uber pickup and drop off, as well as taxis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Grace. I see Amy has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I put a link into the chat that has a comment form where anybody from the NAB board or the public can make a comment on a development project, and it will be provided to the Planning Commission.
Thank you. I was just going to bring that up, and I'm glad you took control. Thank you. So we're going to move on from this item.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Garrett. We're going to move on to item B42, River Point at Idlewild. Maybe we're going to move on.
See, Grace, could you maybe read this one again? Because I think there were a number of questions about this, or introduce Joey to do it.
I can read this one. Joey doesn't have a microphone.
Okay.
So we'll get him one for the next meeting. This one is River Point at Idlewild, case number LDC 22-00039. A request has been made for a tentative map to develop a 120 residential condominiums and B92 non-residential condominiums and a conditional use permit to develop more than 100 residential attached units in the multifamily 30 units per acre zone. The 5.59 acre site is located north of Idlewild Drive, 352 feet west of its intersection with Foster Drive. The site is within the MF30 zone and has a master plan land use designation of multifamily neighborhood.
All right, so thank you. Who approves this?
This one goes to Planning Commission as well.
So they have final authority on this.
Correct, unless it were to be appealed.
Okay, so these are tentative maps. This creates a subdivision.
They're condominiums, but
Yeah.
yes, it's different parcels, yes.
Yeah. Subdivision is the dividing of one parcel into multiple parcels. They can be attached, stacked in a building. They can be spread out in a neighborhood. And then with that comes these conditional use permits in this zoning district. When you get over so many units, you also have other factors, which gives more ability to the Planning Commission to condition the project, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then maybe stick around afterward if there's questions, because one of those questions that came forward was, well, they say they're doing this, but what happens if it doesn't build? How long would it last? And this is a property that's had a couple runs on it. So I think that's not a bad question to bring up. And then also what are the parameters for how many units could be? You know, if you, that's a question a lot of people like to ask, is how many units could go on there? But it really depends. I think the Rio Rancho last time, they got to the very max, but I was calculating that out and saying they got to as much as they could get under some calculations you could have. But on some projects, it's not as easy to understand how many units they could get because it might be governed by something like the height of your building. And if you're putting 3-bedroom units in, you might be getting fewer than 1-bedroom units in a multi-story condition. Would you agree with that? It's hard to calculate ultimate density on something like this.
Yeah, and we have density bonuses for things like affordability or smaller unit design. And I'll stick around after, this particular project is under the allowable density. And so they are within the density, that's the base density that's allowed. But I'll let Karen discuss and then I'll be available for questions.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear from the proponent.
Forgot to unmute myself. Good evening. Hi, my name is Karen Downs. I'm with Manhard Consulting, and I'm here representing the River Point at Idlewild project. Mike Daniels is also on the call. He's with Artec Communities and is the applicant. Goodness, I also have to share my screen. We'll get there. Okay, are you able to see my screen? Okay, good. Okay, so again, this is the River Point at Idlewild project. It's at 2865 Idlewild Drive, and it's just west of Foster Drive on the north side of Idlewild. Excuse me. The site has a master plan designation of multifamily neighborhood, which identifies it as a primary use of multifamily apartment buildings or condos, which is what this proposal is. It's also zoned MF30, multifamily residential. It's the conforming base district to the multifamily neighborhood master plan. This MF30 zoning designation allows for up to 30 units per acre. So the maximum density of this site, the maximum number of units is 167 units. What we are proposing for this project is a tentative map with 120 residential condominiums. And then there's also 92 non-residential parcels, condominiums that are garages on the site. So there's 120 units, residential units. And again, as I mentioned before, the max is 167. Councilmember Breckus, as you indicated before, on this site, because there's more than 100 units, we're also requesting a conditional use permit. So this is showing the site plan, landscape plan of our site. I just want to reiterate that this implements the Reimagine Reno master plan policies, including the infill housing, that there's development adjacent to existing infrastructure and connecting to existing infrastructure, the need for moderate to higher density housing, and then housing within the McCarran Loop. So with this, that's what this project implements. So to tell you a little bit about the site plan, we are, the site is 5.59 acres. Again, we're proposing 120 condominium units. The maximum density on the site is 30 units per acre. And this proposal is for 21.47 units per acre. So it's well under the maximum density allowed. The parking required under new code for this site is 137 spaces. And we're proposing a total of 250 spaces, which includes the garage spaces that I mentioned earlier. So it's a combination of garage spaces, driveway, and then standard surface spaces. The total common area on site is 1.81 acres. It's about 32% of the site. So I want to point out a couple of features on the site. One is the access from Idlewild Drive. Here's from Idlewild, the entry and access point, and then the road loops through the project. There are 6 buildings proposed. Each building has 20 units and has attached garages. So you can see here on the site that the garages are incorporated with the building. They are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And then throughout the site, there's several amenities, including the clubhouse with pool and spa, tot barbecue, outdoor kitchen area, fire pit, dog park over here on this corner, and then an internal walkway and trail. One thing, here's an aerial view of the site. And as you'll see, there's existing condominiums around the site. I do want to note that we met last week with one of the HOAs. There are 2. One of the HOAs to address concerns of the neighbors, and then we'll also meet with the second one when they meet, or at least we've requested to be on their agenda when they meet later this month. And I just wanted to demonstrate kind of how this piece is intended as a transition from the existing single-family neighborhood that's here on the south side of Idlewild Drive to the existing condos. And as I mentioned before, our proposed project is 21.47 units per acre, and the density of the units around is an average of about 38 units per acre. So this is a less dense project and allows for a little more transition between the single family and the existing condos. Some elevations that are provided with the project. As you'll see, they're 3-story buildings. The max height in this MF30 zone is 45 feet, so they will be under the 45 feet. This shows the 4-sided architecture on the building. Again, each building has 20 units with these attached garages you can see on the rear elevation. And then the units will range from 751 to 1,296 square feet. Here's elevations of the clubhouse. On site, the clubhouse will be approximately 1,750 square feet. And then these are elevations of the other buildings on the site. There's going to be some garage spaces, garage buildings, I guess you would call, but garages that hold the individual garage spaces, and then also a maintenance building. There was some discussion at the HOA that perhaps they would prefer a different architecture style that was a bit shorter. This comes to about 18 feet, and that perhaps a different architecture design would have less impact. And so the applicant said that he would be willing to work with them and look at some other roof styles that would have a shorter building. Just throw that out there. Here's an example of floor plans of the first floor units. You can see the garage and storage spaces. And then the second and third floor units. Again, they're 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And they range from 751 square feet to 1,296. These are some photo simulations of what the project will look like. This is the view from Idlewild Drive, and this is the the clubhouse building. You can see through the back the residential condos. And then here's an example of the interior driveway with the garage building on this side and then the condo building on this side. And then this picture is one from the southeast, about the southeast corner on Idlewild Drive, looking towards the site. This would be the sidewalk in front on Idlewild. with that, I am available for questions on the project. Thank you.
Thank you. So Grace, are you speaking to this one or are we good? Everybody's good. We're going to go to questions.
Yep, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, we'll start with Margot.
Thank you. Looks like a nice area. I'm interested in knowing where the land is right now. Is it level or do you have to increase the height of it, which would make a difference on the view from across the street on Idlewild? Like I'm talking about infill, like are you adding 2 feet or anything like that to the land?
This is Mike Daniels with Artec. We're pretty much we're coming off of Idlewild Drive and right now the existing ground slopes off quite a bit. We've got probably on the back side of it about 3 feet of fill. So there will be import into the site in order to bring it up. It's currently in a shaded X zone and we've got to bring it up and above that.
I appreciate a lot of the information was answered in this presentation. With respect to the height of the buildings, if you live across the street, are those basically 1- and 2-story homes on Idlewild on the opposite side?
Yes.
And so yours are going to be 3-story.
Correct.
And so do they have any, where they are now, are the other condominiums the same height that are surround your area?
Actually, the condos that are adjacent to us are actually a 3-story with, it's kind of an underground garage, but it's really not. A lot of the garage sticks up above the ground. So they're actually more like a 3.5-story, call it, and with the same roof pitch. They are about the same height, if not higher than what we're proposing.
Okay, so that's not going to affect views or anything like that then?
The views absolutely will be impacted on the 1st, 2nd story, and possibly even the 3rd story of the existing condos.
And then the other thing too, with respect to the units, on the density, I know you're saying you're doing about 21.5 instead of 30. And I understand that the units are basically, I think, 750 feet to about 1,300 square feet. With respect to those, I guess I'm trying to say, how many of there are each? I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at, I think.
Karen, can you answer that? I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I do, I have that. It'll just take me a second. There are 48 1-bedroom units, 62 bedroom units, and 12 3-bedroom units.
48, and what was the second one?
60.
16?
60.
Oh, 60, okay. Thank
2-bedroom.
you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Jerry.
Are there any floodplain issues?
The project is located in what they call a shaded X zone. And it just requires the fill to be brought up to get out of the shaded X zone. It's not from the Truckee River or anything like that. It's just the project, the site sits in kind of a hole and we've got to bring it up. So if there's any drainage or anything that comes onto the site, it overflows. It has an escape route.
Hey, Carla.
Yeah, I was just wondering about energy efficiency, and maybe the planning could also answer this too. Like, is there any sort of requirements for low water use or putting in solar panels over the parking or on the roof or anything? Is that totally up to the developer? And if so, with the developer, are you planning to do any of that? And also, just to clarify with the planning, when it says MF 30, I assume that means 30 residential units per acre, because they're also counting in these garages, but that doesn't seem to really be part of the number.
Yeah, Grace Whited from the Planning Department at the City of Reno. So the MF30 would be just 30 units per acre. This is kind of a unique situation. There's residential and non-residential units, but we would count the lots individually. And then there are currently no requirements for the sustainability factors that you're talking about as far as solar or energy efficiency. It's definitely encouraged, but there's nothing currently in code that would be required of the developer.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go on to the audience questions, and I'm going to go on to Marlene Olson.
Hi there, I'm interested because I live about a block away. And I'm just kind of curious. I just have 2 questions and I'll ask them. Why are you separating out garage units, and are the garage units just going to be available for the residents there? And secondly, is there just like one way in and one way out? I always think about this as far as fire is concerned.
Yeah, this is Mike Daniels again. I'll answer the second question first. We've already met with the fire department, and we have a divided entryway that's relatively short, and it's divided by a median. Both of those sides are 20 feet wide. So if there was something to happen on one side of the intersection, the fire department could get through. We could have punched out like secondary access out on Idlewild, but met with the fire department, and they're comfortable with what we've got to design. With regards to the garages, these buildings they're 20 units per building, and the buildings only facilitate 14 garages. So that's the reason why we add the additional detached garages. On these garages that are attached to the buildings, 4 of those are direct access. The remaining they're not, you basically have to come out of your garage and walk around to your unit. So between the ones that aren't direct access and the ones that are detached, we have 92 garages. Those will be assigned to individual units. So when you come in and buy your unit, if it's not a direct access, you'll have an option to what garage you want to purchase with your condo. Those are not for anybody offsite or anything like that, or we're not going to rent them to somebody outside of the tenant that has the unit. So.
Thank you. I'm very interested in this because this piece of property has been derelict for so long. It looks like a nice project. So thanks for the information.
Right. I just wanted to take a minute. I did meet with the HOA, the group out on site after we had our Zoom meeting. And we did commit to several things that I will convey to you guys. Our garages and our maintenance building had a shed roof, which pitched it up to about a height of 18 feet. One of the things they wanted to do was to have us reduce that down to a standard pitch, which would take it to about maybe 12 or 13 feet. So we've agreed to do that. We did, let's see. We have a trash enclosure, Karen, if you could go to the site plan. That's located on the east boundary. It's over on the right-hand side of that photo. You can kind of see it buried there. Keep going up. There you go. A little further. That trash enclosure there. It was relatively close to the existing units. So we proposed to bring that down into the southeast corner of the project, down in our open space, down below that, Karen. Right, yeah, right down in there. So it's away from any of the units. Another one of the concerns they have. We walked the site and we're able to get an agreement on where everybody wanted the fence. They've got an old wood fence that runs along the property line. We're gonna tear that out and put a wrought iron fence in a place in a location that was mutual beneficial to both of us. One of the things we also talked about was the landscaping between basically that ran along the property line. There were some existing trees you can probably see by the aerial. There's a couple of them on the east boundary that they wanted to keep. Those were in areas that we're not doing any filler cuts, and so we can facilitate that. And then they just wanted us to make sure that any of the trees that were planted along the property line didn't overhang into the balconies and stuff. So those are the things that we kind of talked and agreed to out in the field.
Thank you, Mike. Let's go on to Jane Lammers.
Can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I live close to where the proposed development will be, and my concern is for the impact of the increased traffic. Per the developer, there will be an increase of 866 vehicle trips per day on this end of Idlewild. This area is currently very active neighborhood with walking, running, biking, and pets. Children and adults alike are out and about. And with the estimated additional 866 vehicle trips per day in and out of this proposed development, I'm afraid that this end of Idlewild Drive will no longer be family-friendly, bicycle and pedestrian safe environment that we currently enjoy. So I just would like the council to be aware of that. That's a lot of traffic going in and out of that development.
Great, thank you for your comment. I don't see any other hands raised.
Mike, there's one more question from Patty Carr.
I saw her hand up and then it went down, so. Patty out there?
Patty, you're muted.
Sorry, this is Patty Carr, and actually my questions were answered. I was concerned about the entrance and egress exit because I did not want them to cut across our property in our back fence, but they're not planning to do that, so that's okay. And one other point that wasn't mentioned by, I guess, the buyer, developer, is that I think they also agreed that some of the trees that they were planting were not native trees to our area, and that they would look into substituting more native species. But my other questions around density and that have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. So I see no other questions.
Mike, if I could just say, I received input from a couple folks. I can't bring the document up, but it sounds like they were folks with the HOAs, and if they're talking to the HOAs, they had some pretty involved questions that I'm sure, I appreciate being copied on, but those are input to, the process where we're here at right now. The staff planner takes those, answers those, evaluates it, attaches those. And so I look forward to seeing the Planning Commission report. The modifications of the application sounded like there was some redesign to the roof. But I wanted to ask Grace, what Planning Commission meeting is this going to go to? Because it sounds like there's been some revisions. Do you know the date that it's going to Planning Commission, Grace?
It's February 16th, and the revisions they made are not part of the tentative map process, so they're architectural in nature. So they've made these, they've had these discussions with the HOA separately, but it's not really part of our review. We have our own architectural requirements, but it's not part of this request.
Okay. And, the questions I thought, and it came up at the appeal last week, they provide preliminary geotech and drainage studies. And sometimes these don't make it into the Planning Commission staff reports. And sometimes I have to go ask for them and look at them when I have questions about that. And it's, it's in the file somewhere, but sometimes they're not uploaded with the requests. And I guess I saw a fair amount of questions about that, and it does sound like there's some raising up. So, it's always the staff planner's discretion whether or not to append those. And I think sometimes leaving them out raises more questions than it answers. But let's talk about the expiration, because I think we talked about the height and all. Now there's 3 stories, but the MF30 allows 4 stories or just 3?
I believe it's 4. I can pull it up really quick if you have other
Okay,
questions.
and it sometimes comes to a question of what's a story, but that's really when you're daylight basement, and it looks like the garages here are full surface level. So yeah, that's one question. And the other question is tentative maps. How long do you have to actually build and construct that?
Yeah, so it's 3 stories total for MF30. And then for a tentative map, it's a little different. You would have 4 years to construct the final map, or
Okay.
to submit your final map.
Okay, and sometimes there can be extensions, and the conditional use kind of goes on the tentative map timing, right?
Correct.
Okay, because some of these hard to build properties, particularly the ones in Ward 1, which I'd like to see go before I go, so people don't have to have more neighborhood meetings on issues, but we want the right development that works for everyone. The last one was kind of hanging out there for a long time, expired, and I think it is good to have a lot of clarity in the staff reports to know about the timing of projects, when they expire, when they could not expire, because no one likes to have the uncertainty in their neighborhoods hanging out there. Once a project's approved, and I found, just to let everyone know, in my experience, the least, if you will, speculative of the approvals are really at the tentative stage. People are ready to rock and roll when they come through for tentatives. So, and I think that's the same for multi-story buildings condominiums as it is for single family, actually probably even more. But anyway, well, great. Thank you, everyone, for presentation on this one.
Right, thank you, everybody. And due to time, and since we still have more items to go, I'm gonna not take any more questions, but remember, all NAB members and the public are encouraged to complete those development project review forms for your input. So if I didn't call on you or you came up with a question later on, feel free to fill one of those out and they will get to the right people. So we're going to skip this evening 4.3, which is Booth Street rezoning, and head to B 4.4 Coral Academy rezoning.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Hi, Mike Rayleigh with Christie Corporation representing Coral Academy. Amy, I think Faisy Tenigan is also logged on to the Zoom. He's with Coral Academy. If he could be promoted to a panelist, just in case there's any questions, that would be greatly appreciated. Let me share my screen here. I was a Zoom expert and then we went back to virtual and now I'm relearning everything.
But if we could, Grace, could you read the case and talk a little bit about it?
Sure. So this one is Coral Academy rezoning, case number LDC 22-00044. A request has been made for a zoning map amendment from neighborhood commercial to specific plan district. The 2.95 acre project site is located northwest of the intersection of Reno View Drive and Sky Mountain Drive. The site has a master plan land use designation of suburban mixed use. This project is still under review. It's going to a specific plan district, which it's one specific parcel and it's zone neighborhood commercial. The intent is for there to be a small school, Coral Academy. And so they're going to create a specific plan district, which has its own handbook that designates kind of the zoning for that specific parcel. So Mike will present and then I'll be available for questions as well.
Well, Grace, who approves rezonings?
So this one will go to Planning Commission and then City Council will approve it or deny it.
Yeah, Planning Commission recommends to the City Council, but the City Council adopts an ordinance and only City Council can do that. Now, specific plan districts, if you get one of those approved, do they expire?
No, unless we were to write in a sunset clause, which this one does not have.
Okay, but with that custom specific plan district, if the project doesn't materialize, what happens? And we've seen that many times.
It would go back to, it would revert to the previous zoning of neighborhood commercial.
No.
this particular project of the school. Maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah.
If the SPD zoning doesn't materialize?
Yeah, this zoning district is one that's very narrow and specific and tied to a project. And if the project isn't materialized, the property owner's stuck with this project. Sometimes they can find a replacement, Coral Academy of Science. They could go get, Ivy Academy of Literature to come in and maybe fill it. But or it just has to stay, and a property doesn't happen, and the property owner has to come through and ask for a rezoning. And that's what happened in Charlins fairly recently on an SPD that was done, many years ago and didn't materialize. So the SPD is a good zoning district. It's one that came back with our new code update, and this is probably, I think, the first one to come through, maybe.
I think it's the second. There's one in process right now. And then I did misunderstand, and I'll let Mike present. It might make a little bit more sense. This particular SPD would allow for the uses that are currently allowed in addition to the school use. So if this project doesn't materialize, they could continue with something else.
Okay, so it's an add-on that gives them more flexibility. Great.
Correct.
Let's have Mike Rayleigh explain the project as the proponent. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. Once again, Mike Rayleigh, the Christie Corporation here representing Coral Academy. Faisy Tanigan is also on the call with Coral Academy and will be available to answer questions at the end. As Grace mentioned, this is a zoning map amendment to rezone 2.95 acres from neighborhood commercial to specific plan district. And Councilwoman Breckus, to address the comment you made, that's a very good comment. The property owner, as you know, I'll get to it in a minute, but this was a former commercial use. The property owner, when we looked at the allowed uses in the existing neighborhood commercial zoning district, a school is not a permitted use. The schools are only permitted, it would have to go to a public facility zone, which is very limiting on what the property could be used for if the school was to stop operating. So the property owner was not comfortable with that, and which is, after meeting with city staff, is why we chose specific plan district, because that would allow the neighborhood commercial uses to be allowed in the future should the school not be in existence. So that's kind of how we ended up with this request. To familiarize you with the site, it's located on Sky Mountain Drive. This is it's storage now, but the former Kmart building. The site was previously occupied for over 20 years by 24-Hour Fitness, which is no longer operating at the site. And actually their South Reno location is no longer operating either and is occupied by another Coral Academy campus. So they are confident they can work that building since they've done it once before. This gives you a little different view. Unfortunately, all the aerials that are out there right now are not quite up to date. So there are some new townhome units built in this area here. This is the indoor storage, the former fitness center, multifamily to the east, and single family, and a mix of single family and multifamily to the south. And then obviously Interstate 80 and the McCarran Boulevard on-ramp on the north side. The building is currently vacant. These are some views from Sky Mountain looking north towards the building. As you can see, everything is already, the site is fully developed and improved. The zoning currently neighborhood commercial, proposed to go to specific plan district. Specific plan district is consistent with the current suburban mixed use master plan designation as well. Let me shift my screen around here. So really, as I mentioned, the specific plan district is being proposed to create a zoning that would allow for a K through 12 school, being Coral Academy. The development standards include specific requirements for the school uses, and I'll get to that in a moment. After meeting with city staff, we decided that we would specifically prohibit public schools where you would have school buses coming and going, for example. Just given the geometry of the site, we didn't think that was appropriate. So it's strictly limited to a private or a charter school. The Coral Academy plans to revitalize that existing vacant building, and the SPD would allow for them to expand the interior of the building up to 18,000 square feet, essentially build out the second level of the existing building. Any expansion of the building itself, of the footprint of the building, would require further discretionary review by the city through a site plan review process. We feel that the school is a complementary use to the surrounding residential uses. It provides a great opportunity for a lot of kids to walk to school. And it's definitely a less intense than the previous 24-hour use that operated the site for many years. We are working with the Washoe County School District to develop a safe route to school plan, consistent with kind of all other schools in Washoe County. A traffic impact analysis will be required when they come forward with their improvement plans for the building. There are limitations on the maximum enrollment built into the SPD. The SPD also requires that crosswalks and pedestrian improvements to Sky Mountain Drive, including pedestrian flashers, be installed. We will, prior to the school commencing, they'll have to have a drop-off and pickup plan approved by the city of Reno. The outdoor playgrounds, we looked at if a playground was added, that we would not locate that on the east side of the building, that would be located away from existing residential uses. Just that way, if the kids are out playing during the day, there's no noise impacts to any existing residential uses. As I mentioned before, if the building footprint was to expand outside, not internally, but outside of the footprint of the building, that would require further discretionary review. The only additional uses that this would permit are the school uses. So essentially a primary and secondary school use. Other than that, all the existing uses permitted under neighborhood commercial will remain without any change in terms of discretionary review. For example, if there's a use required in neighborhood commercial that requires a conditional use permit, that's still required. We did not circumvent any discretionary review with this handbook. And the project must comply with all applicable municipal code standards such as parking, lighting, et cetera. So there's no variances built into this, so to speak. With that, I know you've had a full night. I tried to be as quick as possible. Faizi and I are here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. Grace, do you have anything you want to add?
Nope, I'm available for questions on this one as well.
I don't see any questions, which is great news. All right, seeing no questions. Thank you for your time, Mike. Thank you for your time, Grace. Oh, Margot.
Thank you.
I don't have a question on this project. I just have a question. You said, are we going to do the Booth Street rezoning?
We skipped it, was pulled.
Oh, it was polled. Okay.
We voted for when we did our agenda earlier.
Okay. Thank you.
It was a while ago, long time ago. All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Have a great night. Appreciate your time.
We're going to move on to item C, Board Commission Committee Member Reports and Announcements. Are there any? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item D, Future Agenda Items. Jenny, any thoughts? Anybody have anything they'd like to add for future?
Oh, Mike?
Yeah.
I had to relocate rooms. I'm out of juice everywhere. I'm plugging in here, but and I changed servers. Are we? What are we on? Items for next time?
Yeah, future agenda items, item D.
Yeah, you know, with Nick not here, not able to really let you know what we were thinking about, but we were thinking about that siphon project at Booth Street and maybe the Arlington Avenue Bridge project coming forward, hopefully. But we really wanted to talk to you about the date and, you know, is that next then?
Yeah, well, we got public comment next, so we're talking future agenda items.
Okay. You know, our next meeting is the 14th, which is 2 weeks from now. And we'll have new members to introduce, and I'd like to make sure that we put a section of new member introductions, because I did appoint the new members at the February meeting. So Amy, maybe you could let Nick know. We'll just, you know, make sure we give them an opportunity. Do you guys want to meet in 2 weeks? And then our next meeting after that is March 14th. I know we've had a long one today. We'll probably still be on Zoom, I think, in 2 weeks.
2 weeks from now although it would be pretty short if we've already covered a lot of stuff this time, so.
Well, I unfortunately have a conflict on that day because I didn't know it would be on that day. So I won't be here.
Okay, well, it is Valentine's Day. So what's the board's desire? Do you want to just move our next meeting to March 14th?
We could, but does that mean that, because this one was pushed out a couple weeks, does that mean that agenda will be long also, probably, right?
I don't know. I don't know. And unfortunately, Nick's not here. We could move off the 14th and move it again, to the next week.
Well, let's just go March. Let's go March 4th.
March 14th. Okay.
And the
Okay.
reason is that maybe it's long again, but
Yeah. Well, we're really having discussions about, who gets to come on the agenda for what purpose. Because, with the tree ordinance, for example, if they're having, a tree ordinance public input meeting at City Hall, anyone who's interested could attend to that. Do they need to hit all 5 nabs, or could they, do it one way? And something like that too. These ones that hit 5 nabs, maybe the better approach is just to have one public input meeting. So, trying to figure out the balance on that. But the development projects do come. That's our process.
so if you guys see a large lot of developer projects, maybe we don't bring up some of the other future agenda items we had, maybe if we can kind of look at it that way.
We can, but another thing is, if the NABs just become these mini planning commission inputs, is that really, addressing the issues? My preference, to be honest with you, is infrastructure and very neighborhood specific concerns. But I'll put my, get with Nick when he gets back, and we'll let him know that the desire is to go on the 14th of March.
Oh, not February.
No, we'll go March.
Oh, that's fine.
And everybody can enjoy Valentine's Day.
I
agree.
Okay. Amy, you all good? Okay.
I don't know. I'll check, but that's better than this one.
Okay.
Okay, so any other future agenda items? All right, hearing none, let's move on to item E, public comment. I see no hands raised. I'm going to move on to item F, which is adjournment.
I'll move.
Okay. So Margot's first, and do I have a second? Gary, second. All those 4?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Good.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
All right,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.